My blade, my life are yours.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Belle Became the Guardian of Riveria, the Princess of the Elves movie 2. Before we start, please go support L1 Papri for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Belle is a male. Chapter 31. Belle's red eyes analyzed the two opponents in front of him, thinking of a way to defeat them. He knew perfectly well that Alan wouldn't be a problem for him, however that wasn't the same with Otter. The enormous level 7 bows was a great threat, and the fact that he seemed to have a lot of experience only made the situation worse. I can't focus on just one, the other would attack, and I'd have to shift my attention, and the other would be able to take advantage of it. Belle looked calmly at Alan, thinking about how to get him out of the way. One wrong move and it would seriously hurt the outcome of the fight. Otter was a formidable warrior who posed a huge problem, and adding Alan's speed behind him made it a major disadvantage. I had to find a way to deal with both of them at the same time, or at least a way to take one out and focus on the other. Let's not give him time to think, someone with his experience can come up with a plan quickly, Otter said, getting ready. I know, you muscle-bound idiot, Alan growled. Otter didn't react to Alan's comment and instead stared at Belle. He knew that in a 1v1 he was likely to lose, with Alan supporting him, it would be a good opportunity. Although he was not comfortable having to fight that way, his warrior's honor made him uncomfortable in the fight. Otter had begun to respect Belle, both being formidable warriors with enormous loyalty. He wanted the opportunity to fight Belle alone and prove himself, to be able to fight without being interrupted and giving it his all. But an order from Freya was an order, so he prepared his sword ready to attack, his trained eyes scanning Belle's every possible move. I'll go to the front, attack when you see the opportunity. Otter's deep raspy voice reached Alan's ears, who only grunted in confirmation. Alan was beyond angry. He felt like he might explode with rage right then and there. He had to fight again against the one who had humiliated him, and on Otter's orders, no less. He was definitely furious. Otter advanced towards Belle with his stoic face and his sword ready. A great conflict would be unleashed, destroying everything around him. Alan followed him from a few meters behind, waiting for the opportunity to land a critical blow on Belle. Belle, in turn, looked at his two opponents advancing towards him, so he smiled a little knowing that the intense fight was about to begin. He knew that Otter was an immense wall, difficult to move, and Alan a swift arrow with whom he had to be careful. His speed was greater than Alan's, but he shouldn't underestimate him because it could cost him dearly in the fight. I'll kill you, bastard, Alan growled, frowning. What he wanted most was to kill Belle and get him out of his way. Belle couldn't help but smile, but it wasn't just a simple smile, it was the smile of a predator looking at some simple lambs. You can try, but I won't be responsible for what happens to you, Belle said, smiling. Prepare your mind and take off first. Clink. His sword clashed against Otter's sword, producing a metallic screech and expelling several sparks. Belle lashed out at Otter, throwing several slashes, until he turned his arm, and this time attacked to the side of him. Clank. Alan's spear was stopped by Belle's, but Alan did not stop and launched several thrusts before jumping back. Belle had to raise his sword to block an attack from Otter from above. The force Otter used was devastating and made Belle's feet sink a little. Grrr. Belle couldn't help but groan as he felt his bones tremble from Otter's strength, but he moved his foot forward quickly. I press down on the ground and advance forward, with great speed I swing my sword against Otter's leg. Before he could complete the attack, his instincts, honed over decades, warned him of the danger. So he redirected his attack towards his back with a turn, the result being the collision of two weapons. Attacking from behind is very underhanded, Belle told Alan, who had attacked him from behind. But I admit it's one of the most effective techniques, Belle admitted. He pressed his sword with all his might, causing Alan to back away with Belle pressing on, just as they removed Otter's sword, it struck where Belle was standing. Although they seem to get along badly, they make a good team, Belle said, noticing Alan and Otter's good coordination. Shut up, Alan said, launching several fast thrusts. Belle began to block them but had to duck. Otter's sword passed over him, but that move gave Alan the opportunity to attack Belle. Belle saw Alan's attack and rolled to the right, however Alan was fast enough to slash his leg. Unable to react, Belle was hit by a powerful blow from Otter, the powerful blow sending him flying several meters away. What physical strength, one more and he'll break my ribs. Belle thought, feeling some ribs crack. I have back destroyer activated and it still hurts quite a bit, I have to be careful with that. Belle thought. The duo of Otter and Alan proved effective against Belle. They couldn't overwhelm him, but they could hold him off perfectly. Belle had to find a way to counter the duo and their great coordination, or he would end up losing. He saw their faces and launched into a rapid chant, not giving the others time to react. My sins are my eternal damnation, my laments are silent howls in the forest. Consume me, sins of blood, feelings lost in battle. My life is dedicated to suffering. Great misery. Bel's eyes turned completely red in an instant, while his body grew stronger in every way. Otter narrowed his eyes as he remembered Bel's magic, how Bel grew stronger by performing his magic. Therefore, he used his Von Argancher ability to become a saint and be able to keep up with Bel, otherwise he wouldn't be able to keep up with Bel. But to his surprise, some magical purple rings appeared in Bel's hands before Bel could recite any more magic. Great misery. Great misery. Bel used his Destroid Cannon ability to be able to recite his magic 2 more times without needing to recite the chant. Otter was surprised to see Bel's action. He hadn't seen that ability in their fight, but he still maintained his stoic expression. "Get ready, Alan," Otter said before attacking Bel with his enormous sword, which Bel withstood with ease. Clank clock clink swing clank. Otter and Bel began a fierce fight between the two, where they had to give their all if they didn't want to lose. The ground began to tremble due to the terrible pressure exerted by both warriors, like 2 mountains colliding with each other. Alan watched this with gritted teeth and a deep frown. Just seeing the 2 warriors fighting, he knew he had no place in the battle. But even with that helplessness, he had one last card to play against Bel. He just had to find the right moment. The blows and cuts flew from one side to the other, leaving the 2 with more and more wounds on their bodies. Both swords moved in a murderous frenzy, seeking to end their opponent. 2 pairs of eyes examined every movement with great caution. Otter using his sword and fists to deliver powerful and decisive blows, and Bel using his with precision and speed. Each one being the opposite of his opponent. Otter with physical power and Bel with speed. They perfectly countered each other. Although Bel had Back Destroyer activated, which gave him a great physical boost and an extremely strong body, it was still no comparison to Otter's strength. It did give him great strength and a very resilient body, but for an elf, whose strength standards are very low as it is not their strong point. Otter's sword descended and stuck in the ground, being used as a shield against Bel's rapid attacks. Tank tank. Bel's sword attacked Otter frantically, who defended himself firmly against it, yet he could not completely keep up with Bel's speed. Several cuts ran across his body, some deeper than others. But Otter was like a walking fortress with extreme resilience. Because the fight was escalating, Otter managed to access Tortoise Otter, increasing all of his development skills and using the development skills healing power and spiritual healing. Otter's strength began to increase as the fight intensified. Even with a triple boost from magic, Bel realized a formidable and powerful warrior he was facing. Bel moved his sword and stopped Otter's sword, but the force pushed him 5 meters away from Otter as he dragged his feet. Sparks flashed with each impact they both made, counteracting each other's force. Seeing that no attack was decisive in the fight, Bel decided to activate his active trigger ability Elendite, which allowed him to access the development ability Strong Body and Great Strength. It wouldn't be a huge advantage, but it would tip the scales of the fight in his favor, so he decided to use it. Clank clink tank swin. The attacks continued to flow, increasing the fatigue and injuries of both warriors, but they never slowed down. They knew that whoever let up even slightly would lose. Otter delivered powerful blows with his enormous sword and, when the opportunity arose, powerful blows with his fists, but it was difficult to land a decisive blow. I noticed how Bel's speed increased the longer the fight lasted. I deduced that it was a skill, so I had to end the fight or there would come a point where I would be surpassed by Bel's speed. His feet were firmly planted on the ground, his experienced eyes anticipating Bel's attacks. His sword, being enormous, did not move at great speed, but it did possess an abysmal force capable of destroying everything in its path. Both swords clashed before stepping back slightly, both staring intently at each other, with an enormous presence overflowing from them. Bel was about to attack when he felt magical power increasing behind him. He turned around as he felt something rushing towards him at great speed. A black blur flashed by, trying to kill Bel. He could barely keep up with its speed. He tried to deflect the attack as best he could, realizing he couldn't block it and would die, so he interposed his sword against the blurry attack. Slash. The blur passed over Bel, leaving a deep wound on his side. In fact, it was more than just a wound. A small part of its side had completely disappeared, as if it had been disintegrated. Not really, it's more to give you an idea. Even trying to block it, it was too fast for Bel, who also reacted late to the blurry attack. Bel's feet trembled slightly as strong jets of blood spurted from his side. His strength seemed to be leaving his body. His body trembled slightly from the enormous jolt he suffered. His sword had to be braced on the ground to prevent him from falling to his knees and collapsing on the ground. A huge pain began to spread throughout his body. When he looked at where the blur ended, he noticed that it was Alan who was there. Alan's eyes glared at Bel, a dangerous, murderous gleam in them. Belle sensed traces of magical power emanating from Alan, confirming that he was the one who had blurred the image. I didn't expect him to have such magic, Belle thought, looking at Alan. If I hadn't deflected it, I'd be dead, Belle thought, feeling a little dizzy. All his eyes could see was a blur flashing above him, and he passed him without a problem. Now Belle understood why he called Alan the fastest in Riveria. Despite being dizzy and mortally wounded, he still moved his sword to block an incoming attack from Otter. Clank. Both swords clashed firmly, releasing sparks, but Otter's strength was immense, and Belle was seriously injured, adding to all the wounds he already had. Belle shot backwards through a house with force, sending debris flying around the area. Ugh. Belle expelled a large amount of blood from the wounds, with large jets of blood overflowing from his missing side. He felt his ribs finally break from Otter's powerful attacks, who probably wasn't in good shape either. Many of his bones were broken or about to break. His legs trembled in pain as if they were about to tear apart. I try to get up and lean on my arm so I can get back into the fight, but… Crack. A dreadful, horrible cracking sound resounded from his arm as he tried to hold on to it. His bone had given way to the pressure and finally broke. Belle's eyes tried to focus their vision but failed. All he managed to do was see his surroundings completely blurry. Forgive me, Akina, but this old elf can no longer continue in the fight, Belle apologized mentally, his body bleeding to death. His body lay on the ground, with mortal wounds glistening with blood red and throbbing pains. With the breeze blowing across his wounded body, giving him a dead and chilling sensation. Her will to rise again began to fade, resigning herself to falling in that struggle and being able to rest from this cruel world in which she lived for so long. Odo-chan. Huffs. Otter fell to his knees while holding on with his sword. He had some difficulty breathing because of the painful wounds that Belle had inflicted on his body. Even outnumbered and already wounded, Belle showed him once again what a formidable warrior he was. He tried to get up, but even with his extreme resistance he couldn't manage it. Even with his ultimate defense he was in such a condition, his whole body throbbing with pain. Her eyes turned to the place where Belle's body should be, waiting to see if Belle would get up again despite his terrible condition. Seconds passed and he saw no sign of Belle coming out and continuing to fight, so he sighed, looked to his side and saw Alan. Alan was also staring at the building where Belle was lying, and when he saw that he wasn't coming out, he turned away. Otter's eyes also followed Alan's gaze, and he noticed 3 figures approaching his position. Little by little the figures became clearer as they approached his position, until he was able to identify them perfectly. It was Hedin and Hogni, accompanied by Hythe, the Freya family's head healer. Hythe looked at her family members with a dead, weary expression, her red hair tied in 2 pigtails fluttering slightly in the breeze. She wore a red nurse's uniform with the Freya family crest. The 3 of them quickly approached. Hythe looked at Otter and was surprised to see him in such a state, but he said nothing and simply said about healing him with his Zeokulviag magic, a powerful healing magic that can even heal those on the verge of death. I don't see Belle-san, I suspect they obtained Freya-sama's order and defeated him, Hedin said, inspecting the place with his gaze. Yes, was Otter's simple reply, his face stoic and his deep voice echoing in the air. That evil rabbit has fallen, Kukikus, supreme glory will be satisfied. Said Hogni, now without his magic that changes his personality to a serious one. You pathetic elves did nothing, I was supposed to arrive here more injured, Alan growled angrily. Hedin frowned slightly at Alan's rude words, but still maintained a posture worthy of a king. It was as Freya-sama decided it should be, Hedin said, gently pushing his glasses forward. The Gullivers are already with her, Hedin informed. Let's go back to Freya-sama, the mission is over, Otter said, getting up without injuries, although his clothes showed where they had been. Otter glanced briefly at the building before turning away. He had just had a great battle and hoped that would be the boost he needed to reach level 8 after so long. Riveria was tending to the wounded members of his platoon, as several were injured in their confrontation with Evilus. That's it, rest a little, Riveria told an elf. The elf thanked Riveria with a bow and left. Riveria's beautiful emerald eyes surveyed what had been the battlefield, taking in several bodies scattered all over the place. Smoke marks were also visible, as members of Evilus committed suicide to avoid capture. So much chaos over some monsters, Riveria thought, gently massaging her temples. How are Kina and Belle? She wondered. Suddenly, a discomfort gripped her chest, as if it were the harbinger of a terrible event. He quickly scanned the entire place to make sure nothing bad was happening, but when he saw that nothing was out of place, he was puzzled. Why do I feel like this? Riveria felt increasingly uncomfortable. It hurts. Why does my heart hurt? The sensation grew stronger, making Riveria uncomfortable. I wanted to see what was happening. I knew perfectly well from a report that Akina was fine. But Belle, nothing was known about him. The only information he received was that he was facing the Freya family alone. Just thinking about it worried her. She knew the strength of the Freya family and that only worsened her concern. Belle Riveria's hand moved up to her chest, over her heart. I hope you're okay with that worrying thought, she continued tending to more wounded. Chapter 32. Odo-chan. Her red eyes opened wide as she heard a small female voice that she hadn't heard in decades. Memories that always struck at her heart burst forth just by hearing that voice. Even with his vision blurry, he anxiously searched for the source of the voice, scouring the area until he saw a small figure in front of him. The figure was a small elf, no more than 10 years old, with beautiful pink hair and lovely green eyes that radiated purity. The little elf's gaze was fixed on Belle's wounded body. Her gaze seemed to see beyond Belle's figure, as if she were not directly seeing him. Belle stared in disbelief at the figure in front of him, his face pale from blood loss and bearing a complicated expression. But how Belle's pupils contracted unusually, staring intently at the small elf in front of him. He forced his body to stand up, even while listening to and feeling the disgusting creaking sounds his bones were making. The little elf gazed silently at the dying Belle, a wide smile blossoming on her delicate face as happiness overflowed from her. Slowly, she began to move her small feet in Belle's direction. Each step she took made Belle's heart pound, a heart-rending pain piercing his chest. Are you real? Belle asked slowly, his mortal wounds on his torn body being ignored, all because of what his eyes saw in disbelief. Odo-chan. The little elf girl shouted energetically as she ran towards Belle with a huge smile. Belle's arms creaked in pain and bubbled blood in heaps as he raised them, straining to hug the little elf. Samantha, daughter. Belle's voice broke a little as his sad tone echoed in the place. When the little elf was close to Belle, everything collapsed. Her body passed through Belle's body as she dematerialized like a ghost that never existed, vanishing with the icy night breeze. Belle's arms fell abruptly as an ugly feeling spread through his body, tearing at every last bit of his mind and heart. It's true, you're dead. After all, I was the one who killed you, Belle said, his expression growing darker and darker, a tear threatening to fall from his red eyes that were slowly losing their shine. Belle squeezed his eyes shut, wanting to forget those dark and heartbreaking memories of his past. But he couldn't. It was simply impossible for him. Belle was a person who could never forget his past and lived tormented by it for years. Even at 100 years old, he cannot forget those past events, which have marked him for life. Huff. His body fell heavily to the ground after losing the last of his strength, feeling the cold ground again. Why am I still fighting? I don't even remember why I was trying so hard, Belle said, his voice slowly lowering in volume. Always the same thing, Alf this, Alf that, you only see through Alf. It seems you forget what you really need to see. Belle heard the girl's voice again, only this time it sounded higher than a child's. His eyes scanned the place until they found the elf again, who now looked grown up into a beautiful elf. Her hair was beautiful, her beautiful hair only served to further highlight her delicate prince's face. Just looking at her would leave any man paralyzed. Why do you always compare me to your captain? I'm not him, and I never will be. Not everything is Alf, why can't you understand that? This time a male voice sounded, next to the elf appeared an elf with black hair and eyes of the same color. He had a frown and looked annoyed, his words fired like sharp blades that damaged Belle's soul. I did what I could. Belle didn't feel worthy to look at the elves' faces in front of him, so he lowered his gaze as he listened to them. I only wanted what was best for you, that's all I wanted. Belle said, now unable to move. So you won't do anything. The king will execute me tomorrow, and you won't do anything. That's why I switched sides, always putting Alf above everything, even your family. You asked me why I did it, didn't you? That's why, that was the damn reason for my change. Your damn loyalty did it all. He raised his gaze slightly and saw the same black-haired elf chained up. He had shackles on each of his limbs, with spikes threatening his neck. He stared at him intently, piercing every corner of his soul. Her gaze showed enormous anger, all directed at Belle, further damaging his already broken heart. His eyes glared at him, as if that simple look would kill him in the cruelest way possible. Belle couldn't even answer this time. His strength had failed him. His life was coming to an end after 100 years. On the ground and surrounded by a huge pool of his own blood, stabbing pains of heart-rending agony gnawed at his body. The chilling wind enveloped his entire being, covering every part it could reach and freezing. His heart beat slower and slower, to a decadent rhythm. Finally, the torment he had endured for decades, which had brought him only pain and loneliness, would end. It had slowly and relentlessly destroyed him. What happened to you? Where is the father I admired so much? The one who fought even in the worst moments. The one who gave everything in long night of consolation even with all the pain in his soul. The elf's voice sounded loud again, bringing a strange tone to her voice. The mention of long night of consolation brought back heartbreaking memories of an endless and suffering-filled war. That mention alone tormented his mind even more, causing him to clench his teeth even tighter in an effort to get up. Her fingers began to move with the elf's words, her blurry vision beginning to clear a little. I always wanted you to be proud of the path I took because I admired you more than anything, even with your flaws as a father." This time it was the elf's voice that sounded. Bell gritted his teeth as he began to get up, but he was so hurt that he fell again. His missing side continued to bleed profusely. His organs were visible and looked as if they might burst out of his body at any moment. "Dad, father, no matter what happens, I will always admire you. Even with all your shortcomings as a father, I will always admire you. For always fighting for your ideals even when it affects us, for always standing up for us even in the worst moments, for that very reason thank you for everything, Dad." The voices faded into the air like an inaudible whisper, carried away by the cold breeze that swept through the environment. The heart began to beat faster and faster, vigorously regaining its former constant movement. "Do you remember what you asked me a while ago, Belle?" A strong and powerful voice spoke. Looking up she saw an elf with impressive red eyes, his red hair waving in the wind, giving him a magnificent appearance. "I ask you, why do we fight, why do we endure so much?" Belle answered unconsciously, surprised by the appearance of the red-haired elf. The red-haired elf looked away with a smile, then turned his gaze to Belle. His righteous stare instilled immense respect in Belle's heart. "Come and see for yourself, observe what we fight for." The elf answered, walking. Beside him appeared a 15-year-old Belle who looked a little younger than his current appearance. The eyes of the great Belle followed the two figures as they walked around him. Seeing them reminded him of that moment that marked his life. Finally they stopped in front of many elves, all of them very thin with their ribs almost visible through their skin. All those elves were crying loudly, but it wasn't sadness, it was joy. Each one cheered and celebrated vigorously. In the center of all those elves was an elf with the same emaciated appearance. He had a big smile on his face while thick tears ran down his eyes. In his hands he held an enormous flag, which was waved back and forth incessantly by the emaciated elf. Elle identified the flag as the elf flag, with the original logo, and representative of the majestic forest it has served for years. "Freedom." The emaciated elf with the flag in his hand shouted happily, joy overflowing in his voice and seeming as if it would spill from his body. "Freedom." The other gaunt-looking elves also cheered happily alongside the flag elf, shouting at the top of their lungs. The whining started immediately. Everyone was celebrating without showing any sign of stopping at all. The old Belle noticed how an intense brightness appeared in the eyes of his 15-year-old self, intensifying more as he looked at the scene in front of him. "This is why we fight, Belle, this is why we give our all. To be able to fulfill the dreams of these people so that they can live with dignity and not in misery." The red-haired elf beside him placed a hand on his shoulder with a smile, looked at the people one last time, and then vanished into thin air along with everything else. "That's right, so many years have passed that I had forgotten." The old Belle's eyes began to shine brightly, just as they had shone in his 15-year-old self. Remembering all those things began to motivate him more, increasing his will to get up and keep fighting. Belle's immortal elf ability caused his entire body to explosively regain its stamina even in his deplorable state. His will soared to the clouds as if it had no restrictions, rising up even with so many red shackles upon him. This time, his will to return to the fight had been driven by those voices he hadn't heard in decades. Those memories, seared into his heart, motivated him to rise once again, just as he had done countless times in the past. Powerful flames began to surround his entire body, increasing the temperature of the place as the fire began to consume the oxygen, becoming more intense. "I swore to myself I would never use this power again, but since I arrived in Arario, I haven't stopped using it. I guess it's for special occasions," Belle said to himself, watching the fire engulf him. The painful promise had been broken since he arrived in Arario, broken twice since he made that promise. The first time when he saw Ace use Ariel against him, he had seen another figure in Ace's place, causing him to react violently and break his promise. He regretted losing control that time, but he couldn't do anything to change the past. If he could, he would have done so long ago. The second time he broke his promise was against the ancient elf kings, Hedon and Hogni. He felt he had to teach them a lesson, a very painful one. The truth was, he wanted to kill them, and now he knew he had to. He had to eliminate the danger, just as he had done so many times before. Outside the building where Belle was located, Otter was leaving the place along with the other executives of the Freya family, except for the Gulliver's brothers who were in another place. His mortal wounds had been healed by his family's healer, Hythe, who could cure a person on the verge of death and leave them as good as new. The brutal fight he had just had against Belle thrilled him deep down. Facing a warrior of Belle's caliber made him eager for battle and unleashed his fighting instinct. But he was still not entirely satisfied. His fight had not left him satisfied at all. After all, it had been a 2 versus 1, and he was already injured. Another thing I noticed were all the disadvantages Belle had, from his injuries to his limitations, which were his left arm and the reduction of his eyes. I could clearly see that when I mentioned his reduced vision, Belle got really annoyed. His not-so-brilliant mind came to the conclusion that there was a huge backstory behind his eyes. He decided not to mention his eyes again and focus on the fight, but he still wanted a more real fight, not so staged. Especially the magic. He couldn't use his own because Bell didn't give him a break, unlike when he faced Zald in the Dark Era. On that occasion, both warriors remained still while reciting their magic. Against Bell, that was not possible because Bell did not use his powerful magic. With the exception of reinforcement magic, I don't use any other magic that Freya mentioned before the operation. To be honest, he quickly understood why Bell didn't use his destructive magic. It was very obvious to anyone who thought about it for a moment. And it was the destruction that would attract them to use them, especially after seeing how powerful Bell's magic was. Freya mentioned a lightning magic of mass destruction and that it was the one she had to be most careful with. He kept watch throughout the fight to make sure Bell didn't use his magic, preparing to try and stop him and halt his chanting. But at no point did Bell use destruction magic against him. He thought about it for a while and came to the conclusion he already had. Bell had to be careful with what he did, after all, he practically represented the Hestia Familia in Aurario, since he helped them with the Xenos. Anything Bell did would have repercussions for the Hestia Familia and therefore for Akina, so Bell had to be very careful with what he did. One example was that if Bell attacked the guild, he would turn against practically all of Aurario, which would endanger Akina, whom Otter deduced Bell was protecting with all his might. Otter knew it. He realized it perfectly during his brutal fight with Bell. Bell could beat him if he used his magic at full power. But it would also bring an enormous amount of destruction, which would fall on the Hestia Familia and Akina as captain. Anyone with 2 brain cells like Otter knew that Bell couldn't fight with his magic, or at least not if he wanted to cause serious problems for the Hestia family, but especially for the little elf Akina. He saw that he had a skill or magic that allowed him to possess 2 magic rings on his wrists, and with that he repeated spells used previously. He hardened his mind thinking about Bell using those magic rings to use that devastating lightning magic 3 times. He snapped out of his thoughts as he felt a strong amount of magical power coming from behind him. In fact, all the executives turned around with surprised faces at the overwhelming magical power that was felt. Hedin and Hogni were the most surprised of all. After all, being magicians, they understood more about what was happening. This made them get serious in an instant, with Hogni even using his magic Dane's Leaf to become more serious and capable in battle. "This magical power that I feel is overwhelming," Hedin said seriously, adjusting his glasses with his fingers and preparing his Desera to attack whoever caused that sensation. Otter silently gazed at that overwhelming sensation of magical power, as if an immense source of magical power had broken and unleashed powerful tsunamis of magical power. Although he didn't show it through his stoic face, Otter was truly surprised by the overwhelming amount of magical power he felt. In fact, I compare it to Aza's aerial magic and noticed that they had the same essence, only Bell's was more powerful. Both magics conveyed the same pure feeling of magic, as both contained an enormous amount of magical power. But if you compared them, you could see a big difference between the two. Aza's was like a storm of magical power, while the one you felt was like a huge meteorite about to collide with the world. All the executives of the Freya family positioned themselves ready for a direct and inescapable confrontation. They noticed how the powerful magic power was coming from the place where they left Bell to die. Hogni and Hedin's eyes opened as they felt the magical power. They seemed to have discovered the cause. "What did you discover, Hedin?" Otter asked, having noticed his change, so he hurried to ask what he had discovered. Hedin did not answer and closed his eyes, concentrating better on feeling the magical power, a drop of sweat running down his temple. "This power has its essence," Hogni said in a commanding voice, completely unlike his true personality. This was the effect of his magic. Hedin's eyebrows furrowed slightly, and he opened his eyes with a very intense seriousness in them. "It seems that the cause of the overwhelming magical power is Belsan," Hedin said seriously. Otter didn't hesitate, as he had the same deduction. After all, the power was coming from the place where Bell was dying. He didn't have to be very smart to notice that. Hide out of danger, the rest of you prepare to fight." Otter's orders, delivered in his deep voice, sounded quickly. The beautiful Hythe nodded a little anxiously but still obeyed the order and ran off. The executives took defensive positions and gripped their weapons tightly. Then they saw it. A sea of fire was coming out of the house where Bell was and from where the abysmal magical power originated. An immense brightness blinded them for a few seconds. When they could see again, they saw powerful flames coming from Bell. Just as Az was enveloped in air, Bell did the same, but with fire. Bell's body still bore all the mortal wounds that bled heavily, especially the one on his side that Alan had inflicted. But magically Bell seemed to ignore them, at the same time staring dully at them with sharp eyes. When Bell's red eyes fell upon them, an immense pressure felt as if the air wanted to crush them. "They forced me to use this disgusting power." It's been years since I last used it, Bell told them, ready to kill. This time he wouldn't hold back, even with the destruction he would cause. Although the executives felt the enormous pressure exerted by Bell's powerful magic, they did not drop their weapons and prepared for combat. Aza's golden eyes opened in surprise at what she was feeling. A strong magical power could be felt in the distance. But similar to my magic, Aze murmured, a little surprised. She had faced a demi-spirit with powerful magic. But this was totally different. It felt like his magic, but with an overwhelming and destructive magical power. Even at her full power she could not match him. Her magic would be completely devastated in a confrontation between them. I wanted to go and find out what was causing that feeling, but I had just received an urgent order from Finn to support a platoon. So, looking one last time at where the magical power was coming from, she turned around resignedly and dashed off to where the squad needed support because they were being attacked by Evilus. Aze wasn't the only one who sensed the overwhelming magical power from afar, but being so far away, it didn't reach her in its entirety. Even so, they knew it was powerful. Riveria was no exception and also noticed that the magic that caused it was powerful, like Aze's, but even more destructive. It's like that time it has the same feeling as when Bell used that fire projectile against Aze. Riveria drew conclusions after feeling the magical power. When Bell and Aze fought in a friendly match, Bell managed to fire a fire projectile that contained a strange magical sensation. Now that Riveria felt the magical power again, she realized that it was similar to the time Bell used that magic without singing against Aze. Bell, what are you hiding? Riveria wondered mentally, her concern only increasing upon learning that the magic came from Bell. Although the magic seemed powerful, there was an important detail. Why am I using it? If I'm using it, it's because I must be in trouble. She feared the worst, that something would happen to Bell and they would never see each other again. Just thinking about it made her heart ache. You can do it, Bell, you must win and come back to my side, Riveria implored the one who would forever be the love of her life. With great concern and a pain in his heart, Riveria once again firmly oversaw the platoon he was in charge of. Chapter 33. The flames began to dance all over her body, making her look like a complete fire specter. He looked at his wounds and knew he had to give it his all before it was all over. One last effort would be made. He took a step, ignoring the pain he still felt because the fire did not heal him at all. The powerful fire that covered it only gave it enormous offensive power, but it had no properties other than those for offensive purposes. At most, he could say that things would burn, and that could be called defensive power, but Otter's brute force could connect directly with his body without any problem. Just like Hedon and Hogni's magic attacks, Alan could also use his swift magic against him again. The flames didn't improve his reflexes or anything like that, but he could make fire explode on the soles of his feet to go faster. He pressed his feet down hard and concentrated on directing his fire to that area before exploding it into a shape that would propel him forward. After the explosion beneath his feet occurred, he was launched like a high-powered cannonball. Everything around him became blurry due to the explosive speed he had just achieved, managing to reach the Freya family in a second. Hogni didn't even have time to react when he saw a flaming fist heading towards his face, hitting him squarely. Puff. Hogni's body was thrown as an explosion completely engulfed him. The power behind that blow had knocked him out of the fight. His elven body could not withstand such destructive power. Bell turned around and repeated the same thing with his feet, pressing them down hard and sending an explosion from beneath them to launch himself forward. This time, the one who couldn't react was Hedon, who, like Hogni, was thrown back by the powerful explosive force connected to his face. Bell reacted in time and jumped back with his flames still enveloping him. When he looked where he was, he saw Otter's sword cutting the ground. Otter looked directly at Bell, with a deep gaze that conveyed his seriousness about the matter. His calculating eyes, honed by years of fighting, didn't take long to notice how the fire was similar to the air that Aze used. That bastard pulled a power-up out of nowhere, Alan complained, frustrated by the absurdity of the situation. Bell was defeated, and then suddenly he pulled a power-up out of thin air, as if it were some kind of fantasy story. Otter did not answer and continued staring at Bell, thinking about how he could defeat him now that he was covered in fire. This is what he was hiding. Get ready, Alan, we'll use the same technique as before. Otter ordered, making Alan growl. Before either of them could say anything else, Bell stomped his foot hard, expelled fire from his feet, and shot off. Otter wasted no time and prepared to attack him with his sword. He just had to find the right moment. When Bell was within attack range, he swung his enormous sword with force, ready to cut Bell in half. But when he was 1 centimeter away from cutting it, something happened. Bell disappeared like a red flash of fire. The red beam passed by Otter, completely ignoring him. Otter looked back and saw that it was heading towards Alan. No, in fact, he was already standing in front of Alan with his fist engulfed in flames, but this time it wasn't the explosive force he used against Hedden and Hogni. This time, Bel's fist was enveloped in purple fire. Otter, who was far away, could feel the heat emitted by the purple fire. He ran as fast as he could, but it was too late. "I'll return the attack, kitty." Bell mocked disdainfully, then threw his fist directly into Alan's stomach. Alan couldn't react when Bell appeared in front of him. He only saw in slow motion as the purple fire fist impacted his stomach. But something different happened when I connected. The explosion that happened with Hedden and Hogni did not occur. The purple fire fist pierced straight through his stomach as it melted his organs. He couldn't even respond to the attack as all his strength was taken away in that deadly blow from Bell. "Nothing can save you, little one," Bell whispered, withdrawing his fist, which had lost its purple fire and turned red again. Alan fell to his knees with a disbelieving look on his face, silently staring at Bell's indifferent face before falling to the ground. Bell didn't look at him for more than a second as he used his sword to defend himself from Otter's incoming attacks. Otter managed to pull Bell away from Alan's dying body, glancing at his body for a second before sighing slightly. He couldn't get Alan healed and at the same time fight Bell, but at that moment an electric light flashed in the corner of his eye. Bell also turned to see the brightness, and in doing so he was surprised to see a lightning attack fall upon him. He stomped his foot hard on the ground and shot off to another place, managing to avoid the magical lightning attack. Bell's red eyes looked cautiously at whoever had attacked him with their lightning magic, although the magic seemed familiar. To his disbelief, Hedden stared seriously at Bell, who was completely unharmed, as if Bell had never attacked him. But what Bell didn't know what was happening. He looked at Alan's body and it was gone. In fact, Hogni was also missing. Otter saw an opportunity to attack Bell and lunged at him, but Bell didn't think twice and attacked Otter as well. Blink clank swing path. The difference in power was clearly felt. Otter was being overpowered by Bell and his dangerous flames. It was just a matter of a few more moves for Otter to lose the fight, but luckily for him Hogni appeared with his arm engulfed in flames. Hogni pointed his arm at Bell, ready to fire the powerful flame at his arm, but he didn't expect Bell to grab his arm and smother his flames. "Seriously? Using flames against someone who generates flames?" Bell asked with irony in his voice. He squeezed Hogni's arm tightly and began to burn him. Hogni desperately tried to break free from his infernal grip, but no matter how much strength he used, he could not break free. Hedden appeared with his desera ready to cut Bell, but Bell released Hogni's arm and jumped while doing a somersault. With his hand he grabbed Hedden's head and slammed it against the ground, burning him in the process. Using his sword, he launched himself at Otter, who was also coming to the fight. Blink clank swing path. Bell was overwhelming Otter with his powerful flames, leaving severe burns on his muscular body. While relentlessly attacking Otter, he felt a magical surge similar to when the Boros almost killed him. I stomp the ground hard and unleash flames from his feet explosively, managing to dodge the black blur beside him. When I looked at that blur, I looked back at Alan, unable to look at him, confused that he was still alive after piercing him with his fiery fist. "You should be dead, not even I would survive that wound," Bell said, confused. He noticed a red stain near Hedden and Hogni, and there he saw a red-haired girl in a nurse's uniform, healing Hedden and Hogni. "So they had a powerful healer," Bell said, smiling slightly. "I'll have to kill her first." His face darkened as he stomped his foot and burst into flames against the red-haired girl. Bell had reverted to what he always was. A killer. He wouldn't stop until he saw the Freya family dead and Freya herself back in heaven. Before he could reach Hythe, the red-haired girl who healed the Freya family, Otter got in Bell's way. He placed his enormous sword in front of Bell to stop him. Bell wanted to dodge it and kill Hythe, but Hogni and Hedden appeared, covering him. "I don't have time for this, if the ability loses its effect I will fall defeated," Bell thought, frowning. Soon all the executives stood in front of Bell with deep stares, which Bell returned without hesitation. The tension increased when they all looked at each other. In fact, it seemed as if they were all ready to end it all. The decisive moment where the winner would rise to the surface and the losers would fall to the ground, only one side could win. Otter began a chant, as did Hedden and Hogni. It seemed they wanted to finish off Bell once and for all. Bell did not remain still and gathered all the power of the flames he could around him, slowly creating a flaming lion that covered him. Roar. The lion finished forming and roared madly to the sky. As soon as it finished roaring, it launched itself at Freya's executives. At the same time, they all finished their spells and fired them at the fire lion that was charging at them. Both spells raced wildly in a straight line until they finally collided. Boom. The ground trembled as all the magic collided, creating a powerful shockwave between them. The poor red-haired girl was sent flying by the power that was released. Unfortunately for the Freya family executives, their magic was consumed by the fiery lion that roared with madness. That determined the winner. The moment they saw the mighty fire lion roaring with madness consume its magic, they knew who would be the winner. They had no time to dodge the powerful lion that roared madly in front of them, so they just watched helplessly as they were consumed by the lion. Their bodies began to burn as the fire lion dissolved, leaving them on the ground with their bodies like pieces of black flesh. Bell looked at the bodies of the Freya family executives with indifference, but to his surprise Otter was still standing. "You're really hard to take down, kid, but I'll make sure you fall," Bell said, flattering him a little. Otter did not answer and they prepared his enormous black sword. As long as he could fight, he would hold his sword and fight. Bell walked towards Otter with his fist ablaze, turning purple and emitting a powerful, desolate heat. His footsteps sounded heavy as the fire gathered in his purple fiery fist, like a reaper stalking its prey. Otter walked a little and attacked Bell first. Bell stomped on the ground and exploded in fire in Otter's direction. He simply ducked and dodged Otter's enormous greatsword, retracted his fist, and plunged it into Otter's chest. Grrrr. Otter couldn't help but groan in pain as he felt his insides being burned by Bell's fire. The smell of burning began to fill the area as Bell retracted his fist, leaving a hole in Otter's chest. His legs seemed to want to give way, but he forced himself not to fall to his knees while he leaned on his sword. As long as he was conscious, he would never kneel before anyone other than Freya. Besides, his warrior pride prevented him from doing so. Otter ignored the pain and the smell of burned flesh coming from his chest, instead choosing to look directly at Bell until the very end. Bell continued walking towards Otter, his sword in hand, ready to behead him and end the fight. He patiently approached Otter's body, raised his sword, and lifted it into the air in a position that would allow him to kill him cleanly. "Before you die, I'll admit you're a formidable warrior, but you still have a long way to go. It's a shame your path as a warrior ends here," Bell said sincerely. At that moment the sword moved. A few blocks away, Freya watched everything in wonder. Seeing Bell's soul blossom excited her immensely. For a moment he worried that his children would tie him up and was about to go and stop them, but when he saw Bell surrounded by fire to his very soul, he couldn't help but be drenched in stasis. Finally, he watched as his family was subdued by Bell and his mysterious yet powerful fire magic. He was shocked to see Alan being pierced by Bell's fist at a critical point, but luckily Hythe arrived to heal everyone. When Bell surrounded herself with that fiery lion, she almost collapsed from how fascinating it seemed, but she forced herself to keep watching until the end. Finally, his family was defeated by Bell's power, leaving only Otter standing and standing up to Bell. "I've seen enough, I'll take Bell-kun right now," Freya said to herself, starting to walk in Bell's direction. Previously, she was being guarded by the Gulliver's brothers, but Freya ordered them to go in search of Hythe to heal the wounded. I walked a little, my eyes slowly changing to a dazzling silver. The silver eyes emitted a strange divine aura. He was staring intently at Bell to charm him and stop him from killing Otter. He was already thinking of making him his own. But when he tried to cast his charm on Bell, something strange happened. His charm could not be fired. She tried several times, but she simply couldn't do it. Some kind of invisible barrier prevented her from achieving what she wanted, and that bothered her. "Yufufu, I won't let you interfere, Freya. The best is yet to come, and you want to ruin it." Freya frowned upon hearing that tone, as icy as ice and playful as a child. She turned around and saw a beautiful woman standing 3 meters away from her. Their eyes met and seemed to spark. "Hades," Freya growled, annoyed but still smiling, though her annoyance was clear in her tone of voice. "Why does someone like you interfere with what I'm doing?" Freya asked irritably. Freya knew perfectly well that her power was weak against Hades, a goddess who can use her divine power freely, as she is in charge of the underworld. If Hades wanted to, he could destroy all of Aurario in the blink of an eye, and no one could stop him. Not even Uranus. Although she was curious as to why Hades was intervening in a matter so trivial to her, or so Freya saw it. "This is no longer your playground, Freya. It belongs to me now, he. Hades smiled mockingly and looked in Bell's direction. "Besides, a dramatic moment is about to happen, and I don't want to miss it just because of your childish whims," Hades said with superiority. All Freya could do was clench her hands a little in frustration at not being able to do anything against Hades. "Can you tell me why you're interrupting my business, Hades?" Freya asked with a smile. She didn't understand the reason for his annoying presence. Hades looked at her over his shoulder, as if Freya were just a fly in his path. "What do you care, Freya? I do what I want and you can't stop me," Hades mocked with gusto. Freya became even more annoyed. They were treating her the way she treated the rest of the world, and that really bothered her. But she was powerless to do anything. Hades could send her back to heaven if she tried to make any move. "So, what is it that you don't want to miss?" Freya asked curiously, knowing that she couldn't do anything with Hades in her way. "See for yourself, Freya. If everything goes as I expect, it will be a battle of ideals. Or perhaps nothing will happen. One never knows what will happen in this world. Hades said with a smile. And to think you forced him to use that power he hates so much. You surprise me, Freya. Hades thought without turning to look at Freya. Bel was about to decapitate Otter and then finish killing the Freya family executives who were surprisingly still alive. Bel's sword moved, ready to decapitate Otter and end their trouble. But a scream stopped him. "Stop, Bel-san," shouted a female voice that Bel recognized instantly. He turned around and saw that it was Akina who was yelling at him. She looked somewhat dirty, but without any worrying injuries on her princess body. "Don't kill him, Bel-san, that's not right," Akina said, slowly approaching him. She was worried to learn that Bel would have to face the Freya family alone. So, as soon as the conflict on the other side ended, she ran off to find Bel. Bel silently looked at Akina, thinking of what to say to make Akina leave and continue with what she was doing. Finally, he decided to talk to Akina. Akina just turn around and walk away from the area. "Don't look back for any reason, please," Bel asked gently. "No. What you're doing is wrong. Good people shouldn't kill others. So put the weapon down. The conflict is over," Akina said without taking a step back. Bel grimaced at Akina's stubbornness. It was just like her grandfather's. A stubborn old fool who didn't know how to give up. "You don't understand, Akina. War only ends when one side dies. That's the truth of war," Bel told her, then extended his aching tired arms. "This is war," Bel said. At that moment Akina noticed Bel's horrible injuries. She was so horrified that she felt like vomiting. Her mind was so focused on preventing Bel from killing her that she completely ignored Bel's injuries. "Bel-san, your injuries. They're very serious, we have to find Ermid to heal you," Akina said worriedly. "I was about to move, but I noticed Bel moving his sword, ready to decapitate Otter, so I stomped my foot hard and propelled myself towards Bel." Clink. The girls came out to the sound of the metallic clang as the two swords made contact. Bel didn't even flinch because he knew Akina would defend Otter to prevent him from killing someone. That was Akina's attitude. "Then it will be so," Bel said, watching as Akina blocked his attack. He looked around and noticed some nosy people observing the events with astonishment. In fact, it seemed that they were still being seen as the bad guys for defeating the powerful Freya family. Bel's red eyes scanned the place carefully, seeing that Akina would be caught up in it as the bad guy. "I sighed a little at what I was about to do, but it was for Akina's sake." Akina was still too young to understand things in detail. Clink clank swing. Akina was surprised when her instincts warned her to defend herself, so she moved her sword and reacted to Bel's sudden attacks. The difference between them was obvious, but Akina noticed how Bel's movements were gradually decreasing in consistency and strength. She knew immediately that the wounds were consuming him, which made her even more worried. "Bel-san, let's stop fighting. We need to treat your injuries first," Akina pleaded, worried about Bel's health. "I won't stop until the Freya family is dead, Akina. They are a danger to you and must be eliminated," Bel replied, taking a step back. But Akina no longer knew what to do. Bel's condition was getting worse and worse, and he seemed unwilling to give up on his decision to kill the Freya family. "Do you want to be a hero, Akina? Then stop me and end all this so no one dies," Bel said, lunging forward forcefully. Clink clank clink. The metallic clashes began to sound as both swords collided, only one of the sword forces was rapidly losing power. While Akina and Bel were fighting, the Gulliver's brothers discreetly took the Freya family executives away on Freya's orders. Bel noticed this but couldn't do anything. His strength was running out and he knew he couldn't fight with both forces at the same time. His fire had long been known to be extinguished and he probably wouldn't be able to use it in that fight, or at least his energy wouldn't allow it. His organs were slowly shutting down, making it harder for him to move, which told him that his end was near. Bel attacked with his sword with swift cuts that Akina blocked without being injured. Clearly Bel was not attacking her with bad intentions. "You don't have to do this, Bel. We can calm down and talk this out," Akina said, crouching down and counterattacking Bel. Dialogue. "That word doesn't exist in the Akina war, here the one who kills the most wins." Bel suddenly unleashed all his murderous instinct. The pressure Akina felt froze her in place. Everyone in the place could feel a strong pressure on them. Akina was stunned by Bel's overwhelming killing instinct. It was so dense and heavy that her knees wanted to give way under the pressure. Now she wondered, how many people has Bel killed? She herself couldn't unleash her murderous instincts because she had never killed a person. The fact that Bel had such a strong killer instinct made her freeze in place even more. But she gritted her teeth and forced herself not to give in to the pressure. She still believed that Bel could change. Hestia had told him that Bel was hiding a very dark past and that he should be careful even if they were allies. Now he saw what Bel's past was, and in Bel's own words. His grandfather was in that dark past too. Bel slowly began to approach Akina, staring intently at her. But to her surprise, Belle's face changed strangely, and in the blink of an eye, he pushed her out of place. Then he raised his sword to shield himself from something. Huff. He saw in slow motion how a strange being that emitted a dead feeling struck Belle with its sword. Belle managed to cover himself with his sword, but the being's strength was high, though not as high as Otter's, and Belle's weakness only compounded the problem. Belle's body was flung to the side as it crashed through one house in its path. Dust flew everywhere after the destruction of debris. Belle on the ground was breathing with difficulty. Hades, damn you can never help in critical moments. Belle complained between breaths. She raised her gaze as best she could and saw a huge black bull and a powerful axe standing next to Akina. It seemed that it was going to help her. He got up even though his whole body was torn apart and blood flowed like water, took his sword and used it as a walking stick. I have to help her, Belle thought, taking one step, that was all Belle could walk before collapsing and falling to his knees. He didn't fall to the ground, completely collapsed just because of the sword. Damn useless legs, they're completely broken, Belle cursed as he surveyed the condition of his body. I looked up and all I could do was see Akina and the Black Minotaur fighting against the being that Hades sent. Unfortunately, his vision blurred, and that was all he saw. Belle. Belle holds on. The voice was sounding in his head, insist on opening his eyes. He opened his eyes, which felt very heavy, as if someone really strong was forcing him to keep them closed. When he opened them everything was blurry, but among all that he saw what looked like a green stain trying desperately to heal him. Hang on, Belle, everything will be alright. Belle managed to identify Riveria's voice. She was the one desperately shouting at him to hold on. Riveria. Belle used what little strength he had left to speak. How's Akina? Belle asked, ignoring everything. She's fine, she won. Now don't talk and let me heal you. Riveria said, a green light in her hands. Belle could see the tears falling down Riveria's delicate face. The despair was more than evident. He slowly moved his hand to Riveria's cheek, constructed, a slight smile appearing on his face as he did this. Now he realized that Riveria had earned a very special place in his heart. It was a shame that he was hurting, he realized so late. Baka, don't waste your energy, Riveria scolded sadly. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't heal Belle's wounds. There were too many and they were very serious. I couldn't go for Ermid because she had fainted from using her healing magic so much. The other doctors were healing people after all the conflict. Riveria, I'm sorry, his body felt very cold, he couldn't move anymore, he was dying. Take care, yuck. Belle spat blood as he tried to speak, worrying Riveria even more. Don't talk, idiot. Riveria shouted, not knowing what to do. If she moved Belle's body, it would hasten his death. Take care of Akina for me please, that was all Belle could say as the light in his eyes completely disappeared. His last request before he died was that Riveria take care of Akina for him. After 100 years, Belle had fallen in battle after so much pain in his life, after going through so many things he finally reached the end of his journey. There was no emotional farewell. Not even a farewell speech. Just one request before I leave. Her journey today ended, leaving an elf's heart broken. The day finally ended the torment that had weighed on his mind for years, tearing at every part of his heart. Today, a brave soul said goodbye after fighting for too long to finally achieve the peace for which it fought so hard. Chapter 34. Riveria wept inconsolably upon seeing Belle's lifeless body, dead from all the wounds he received throughout the fight. She was the only one left in that house, which was in ruins from the impact of Belle's body. No Belle sniffs come back. Riveria wept with her heart broken into 1,000 pieces after seeing the death of her beloved. She felt a strong pressure in her chest, tears welled up from her beautiful emerald eyes that were now red from crying so much. She wanted it all to be a nightmare, for Belle to wake her up with a kiss and look at her lovingly while he hugged her. But no matter how much she cried, nothing changed. Belle was still dead. His cold, blood-covered body lay on the ground as she hugged him tightly, not wanting to let go of him for any reason. Tap tap tap. Riveria didn't even lift his head when he began to hear footsteps beside him. He decided to ignore it while hugging Belle's body. Stay away from the body, I'll try to bring it back. A distorted voice sounded, but Riveria didn't even pay attention to it. The person who spoke remained silent after receiving no response from Riveria, so they began to sing anyway. The black magic circle appeared beneath the feet of the person who was reciting the incantation. Riveria looked up as she felt a great magical power gather in that person, whom she could only see wearing a black robe. She opened her eyes in surprise at seeing the black robe. For a moment she thought it was another elven hunter still alive, but upon seeing the skeletal hand she dismissed the idea. What are you doing? Riveria asked, disheartened and still crying bitterly, saddened that the person she loved so much was lying lifeless in front of her. The person ignored her and continued with their incantation, which was a really long incantation. Unexplored area, the forbidden wall. On this day, I disobey the code of heaven. The Asclepius of Pius, the chalice of Salus. Your voice forcing the power of healing to arrive, I desire it despite the waiting. King's tribunal, thunder of condemnation. If you are burned despite God's providence, confront your own hell. Open Cayman, beyond the river of the underworld. Listen, dark king. I wish to cross the threshold of madness. Stop the unexpected tears, the scattered lamentation. The price has been paid. Light of the path. For the sacrifice given in the past, I want the elimination of the senseless desire. Oh, I do not look back. Dear Orpheus. Belle's body glowed for a few seconds before going dark. He was still dead. What was that? Why did Belle's body glow like that? Riveria asked, a little hopeful. She didn't know what the stranger was doing, but it seemed like he would help her. I'm trying to revive him, please don't interfere, the person in the black robe pleaded, quickly resuming the incantation. The magic black circle reappeared at the feet of the person in the black robe, and the magic power danced around him once more. Unexplored area, the forbidden wall. On this day, I disobey the code of heaven. The Asclepius of Pius, the chalice of Salus. Your voice forcing the power of healing to arrive, I desire it despite the waiting. King's tribunal, thunder of condemnation. If you are burned despite God's providence, confront your own hell. Open Cayman, beyond the river of the underworld. Listen, dark king. I wish to cross the threshold of madness. Stop the unexpected tears, the scattered lamentation. The price has been paid. Light of the path. For the sacrifice given in the past, I want the elimination of the senseless desire. Oh, I do not look back. Dear Orpheus. Belle's body glowed again, but he was back to normal and nothing happened. Riveria clung tighter to Belle's body when she saw it wasn't working, tears welling up in her beautiful eyes once more. She still held out hope that Belle could return to life through what seemed like a miracle, even though it was on the part of the person in the black robe. The person recited the incantation again. It seemed he would not give up until he brought him back to life. Unexplored area, the forbidden wall. On this day, I disobey the code of heaven. The Asclepius of Pius, the chalice of Salus. Your voice forcing the power of healing to arrive, I desire it despite the waiting. King's tribunal, thunder of condemnation. If you are burned despite God's providence, confront your own hell. Open Cayman, beyond the river of the underworld. Listen, dark king. I wish to cross the threshold of madness. Stop the unexpected tears, the scattered lamentation. The price has been paid. Light of the path. For the sacrifice given in the past, I want the elimination of the senseless desire. Oh, I do not look back. Dear Orpheus. The result was the same. Nothing was working. Belle was still dead. Unexplored area, the forbidden wall. On this day, I disobey the code of heaven. The Asclepius of Pius, the chalice of Salus. Your voice forcing the power of healing to arrive, I desire it despite the waiting. King's tribunal, thunder of condemnation. If you are burned despite God's providence, confront your own hell. Open Cayman, beyond the river of the underworld. Listen, dark king. I wish to cross the threshold of madness. Stop the unexpected tears, the scattered lamentation. The price has been paid. Light of the path. For the sacrifice given in the past, I want the elimination of the senseless desire. Oh, I do not look back. Dear Orpheus. Unexplored area, the forbidden wall. On this day, I disobey the code of heaven. The Asclepius of Pius, the chalice of Salus. Your voice forcing the power of healing to arrive, I desire it despite the waiting. King's tribunal, thunder of condemnation. If you are burned despite God's providence, confront your own hell. Open Cayman, beyond the river of the underworld. Listen, dark king. I wish to cross the threshold of madness. Stop the unexpected tears, the scattered lamentation. The price has been paid. Light of the path. For the sacrifice given in the past, I want the elimination of the senseless desire. Oh, I do not look back. Dear Orpheus. Unexplored area, the forbidden wall. On this day, I disobey the code of heaven. The Asclepius of Pius, the chalice of Salus. Your voice forcing the power of healing to arrive, I desire it despite the waiting. King's tribunal, thunder of condemnation. If you are burned despite God's providence, confront your own hell. Open Cayman, beyond the river of the underworld. Listen, dark king. I wish to cross the threshold of madness. Stop the unexpected tears, the scattered lamentation. The price has been paid. Light of the path. For the sacrifice given in the past, I want the elimination of the senseless desire. Oh, I do not look back. Dear Orpheus. No matter how much the man in the black robe used his spell, nothing happened. Everything remained in a white glow. Riveria had already broken into flat terrain again. That long-awaited miracle that she thought would bring Belle back to her didn't work. The person in the white robe used the spell one last time. With their last ounce of mental faculties, they would use it again. Unexplored area, the forbidden wall. On this day, I disobey the code of heaven. The Asclepius of Pius, the chalice of Salus. Your voice forcing the power of healing to arrive. I desire it despite the waiting. King's tribunal, thunder of condemnation. If you are burned despite God's providence, confront your own hell. Open Cayman, beyond the river of the underworld. Listen, Dark King. I wish to cross the threshold of madness. Stop the unexpected tears, the scattered lamentation. The price has been paid. Light of the path. For the sacrifice given in the past, I want the illumination of the senseless desire. Oh, I do not look back. Dear Orpheus. Belle's body began to glow again, but little by little the glow began to fade. But when the shine is about to fade, strange creaking sounds began to emanate from Belle's body. Riveria watched in amazement as the blood on the ground began to flow back into Belle's body, healing all his wounds as if they had never existed. Not only the wounds, all the clothes began to reform on Belle's body. It seemed like a miraculous scene. Riveria gently held Belle's body, placed her hand softly on Belle's cheek, and looked hopefully for him to open his eyes. Belle's eyes began to open slowly, seemingly disoriented by what was happening. Belle. Riveria didn't waste any time and hugged him tightly, her delicate arms happily enveloping Belle's body. Tears welled up in her beautiful eyes again, only this time they were tears of joy. Riveria. Belle spoke slowly as she readjusted. What would happen? She asked, not knowing what was going on. You're an idiot. You fool, sniff. Riveria began to sob as she hugged Belle, as if someone wanted to snatch him away. The person in the black robe gave Belle a deep look. More than deep, it seemed disconcerted by something. He turned around silently and walked away. He didn't want to ruin the moment for Belle and Riveria after all. Belle watched the robed person walk away silently, easily recognizing him as Fels, Uranus's faithful assistant. I'm sorry for worrying you, Riveria. Belle said gently, though he didn't know what was happening. He was basing his thoughts on what he remembered. He remembered dying while asking Riveria to take care of Akina, then only darkness. In the darkness he saw a huge padlock with a strange magic. It seemed that the magic wanted to prevent the padlock from being broken at all costs. Then he opened his eyes and he was back where he was supposed to die. Idiot, all you know how to do is apologize. Riveria said without loosening her hug on Belle. Belle felt guilty for always worrying her. So how about this? Belle gently grabbed Riveria's face and lifted it so she could see him, then kissed her on the mouth. Riveria was surprised but quickly returned the kiss, a kiss where both released their feelings. Belle, after a few seconds, separated himself while looking at Riveria with a small smile. Riveria, I've realized I've fallen in love with you. Maybe I'm always worrying you. Belle couldn't continue because Riveria kissed him harder. It lasted a few seconds before they separated. Idiot, you don't know how happy those words make me, Riveria said, pressing her forehead to Belle's, her eyes looking at him with love, a true love. Honestly, this is the first time I've ever been in love, so I don't know what to do. Before, I just followed the advice of an old friend, Belle said sincerely, the memory of a perverted old man with a thumbs up and a goofy grin flashing through his mind. Don't worry about that, Belle. I'll show you how beautiful the love of an elf is. The purest love you'll ever know, Riveria said, caressing his cheek. Belle didn't answer, he just smiled. He knew Akina was alright because of the memory he had of her before she died. Now he wanted to enjoy his time with Riveria. Hades finished watching Belle's fight against the Freya family and summoned a being to fight against him. He watched Belle's death with his eyes unmoved, as if he didn't care, no, as if he already knew it would happen. His eyes glowed black for a few moments, he extended his right hand and a strange square crystal appeared. What did you think, Larful Kun? Hades asked with a smile, seemingly speaking to the strange crystal in his hand. I thought I would never see him use that power again, after all, he hates it with all his being, the crystal replied, from where the voice of a man came. The man Hades was speaking to was Larful, the king of Alf and of the elves throughout the world. For some reason, he also seemed to ignore the fact that Belle had died, just as Hades seemed to be expecting it. You already have a son-in-law, Fufufu. Your daughter is clearly in love with Belle Kun. If you tell me she's a schoolgirl in love, I'll believe you, he, Hades said, laughing. The glass was silent for a few moments, until Larful spoke again. I approve of him as Riveria's brother-in-law and partner. There's no one better suited to be her partner, Larful said through the glass, seemingly pleased with the outcome. Belle will be able to be with her forever, and besides, he'll keep a close eye on her, Larful finished. Now that he's your brother-in-law, do you plan to tell him the truth about what happened that night? Hades asked with interest. He recalled how Larful asked him to alter some specific memories of Belle. He wanted him to change them at all costs. No, not yet. It's too soon to show him the truth about the others' deaths. His curse must also remain a secret, Hades. I hope you don't say anything. Larful said in a serious tone. Fufu, it'll be more interesting when you tell him if you tell him the truth, Hades said, amused. Anyway, you used one of the favors I owed you to alter his memories of that night, Hades recounted, as if it were no big deal. It would be best if she never knew. It would only shatter her already wounded heart even more. But sooner or later, the seal on her mind might break and she'll remember everything, Larfel said, a hint of sorrow in his voice. Tragic memories returned to his mind. He remembered that night when many strong warriors lost their lives. We didn't expect that betrayal. It took us all by surprise and with our guard down. It was too late to stop him, Larfel said, tired of recalling the event. Such power is unimaginable. Had I been there that night, I wouldn't have survived either, even though I'm only level 9, Larfel said, revealing a shocking secret for any elf. The king of Elf, whom everyone believed hated the gods, had a Felna, and not only that. He was also a powerful level 9 warrior. That day everyone died, including Belkun. That's when we discovered his curse. Today he died for the second time. I wonder what he'll have to pay for his resurrection this time. Fufufu, how interesting. Hades said with a strange smile. No one who saw it could decipher what he was thinking. Hades looked one last time at Belle and Riveria gazing lovingly at each other, smiled slightly, and disappeared in black fire. Bells walked silently through some dark corridors towards Uranus's chamber. He had to report what had happened. Urano-sama. Fels arrived at a huge room with a few lit candles, in the middle on a ladder, and a throne was Urano. Tell me what happened, Fels. I want every detail, Uranus ordered in a deep but powerful voice. Fels proceeded to tell Uranus everything that had happened, and he listened carefully to every word Fels said. When I used the spell to revive him one last time, it didn't work, but somehow, through some external means that I don't know, he came back to life, Fels said, a little puzzled. When I tried to revive Belle several times, I couldn't. The spell simply didn't work on Belle. But just as he was about to say that he couldn't revive Belle's blood returned to his body and somehow revived him, a way he didn't understand. I see. Uranus closed his eyes in contemplation, processing everything that had happened. We can't do anything to investigate. They're their secrets, after all. Hades must know this well, but I doubt he'll tell us anything, so don't mention the subject again for safety's sake. Uranus ordered, looking at Fels. As Urano-sama commands, I will go and see the Xenos who are already in the dungeon, Fels said, slowly leaving the room. Uranus looked at him for a few seconds before closing his eyes. He wanted to know how Belle revived, but it wasn't his business. The elven special hunters always were and always will be a mystery to the world. Just like their bold predecessors commanded by King Larfel in the time of the ancient king, they too will remain a secret for all time. Uranus thought with his eyes closed. At the end of the day everything turned out well. The war between the Hestia family and their allies against the Loki and Freya families ended. Both sides emerged without casualties, or so it was reported to the general public. Bellcranel faced the Freya family alone and emerged victorious shortly after he faced Akina Suzuki, but the fight was left unfinished. The fight between the two was interrupted by a strange, unknown being who knocked Bellcranel unconscious with a single blow. Only the adventurers knew, however, that he was already in a very poor condition and unable to withstand the attack. As if it were a story told by poets. Akina and a mysterious giant black bull monster helped with the fight. The fight was intense between the three warriors, but in the end Akina and the bull emerged victorious against the strange being with a sword. Everyone who witnessed the fight was amazed by Akina Suzuki's final attack, a white magic that sounded like a ringing bell. Its power completely disintegrated the strange being. This magic was not magic but a skill, but people outside the Hestia family would not know that and would think it was magic. Everyone in Auraria was so focused on the fight between Akina and the Black Bull against the strange being that they didn't know about Belle's death. Riveria and Fels were the only ones who would know about this discovery, besides Belle himself. But Belle thought it was Fels who revived him, or so Riveria told him. Frey wasn't even aware of this. She was so engrossed in Akina's fight that she completely forgot about Belle. It had absolutely nothing to do with Hades still being in Aurario. The fact that Hades seemed to be in Belle's dark background only made Freya want him more to discover all the secrets that Belle hides. Unfortunately, most of the secrets would never see the light of day again. Hades herself would see to that. Less than a day had passed since the Xenos conflict occurred, and the Hestia Familia was resting after such a heavy battle. Belle was the case. He had gone to the walls in the morning to see the horizon and relax a little. Watching the sun rise gave Belle a feeling of peace, and he watched it all with a smile. He recalled how some loved ones appeared in his moments of death when it seemed that he had lost against the Freya family and his end had been decreed. Instantly, his peaceful face turned somewhat somber as he thought things through, his eyes becoming heavily shadowed as he remembered something. There was one thing in particular that didn't add up in what he heard. How did my daughter know about Long Night of Consolation? Belle wondered, his face somber and his eyes clouded. She was already dead when that happened, could it have all been my imagination? Belle thought, confused. At the time, he didn't attach much importance to his daughter mentioning Operation Long Night of Consolation, or rather, war. His darkened gaze stared intently at the horizon. Any adventurer who wasn't first class would have succumbed to such a dark stare, under such deadly pressure. I gaze at the beautiful grass that stretched out from outside the walls, giving a fantastic view to its lord. But that beautiful view abruptly changed to a dark war-torn landscape, mud covering every inch of ground. Black clouds poured their sorrows over the barren land where a great battle was being fought. At his sight appeared hundreds of people wearing black robes and white animal-shaped masks. They were fiercely fighting against strange creatures that were putting immense pressure on them with their titanic power. Hundreds of magical explosions were being unleashed at all times by the elves on the battlefield. His gaze focused on a single person, a figure in a black robe and lion mask, fighting with a sword. The black robe was covered in numerous scratches and thick mud and blood. His movements looked slower and slower, showing the exhaustion of fighting for a long time. One of the strange creatures launched a bizarre attack and disintegrated one of his arms, leaving him lying on the ground, powerless against the overwhelming power of his enemies. The masked man breathed heavily before slowly getting up, his wound bubbling with blood, his already dirty robes becoming even more stained due to his massive bleeding. I look ahead and notice several creatures beginning to surround him. No matter how much I look at the gaps, I can't see a place to avoid being surrounded and succumbing to the strange creatures with unimaginable strength. But before they could finish him off, a person wearing a dragon mask and another wearing a chameleon mask appeared and saved him. The one with the chameleon mask shot silver rays hitting the strange creature and soon began to face it with fervor. The other one with the lion mask glanced at the one with the lion mask for a moment but had to move to defend himself from another strange creature that was attacking him. Soon more creatures rushed at them as red flares began to shoot into the dark cloudy sky. The one with the dragon mask carried the one with the lion mask who was injured and started running, while the one with the chameleon mask bought time by throwing silver rays everywhere the creatures appeared. All the masked individuals began to retreat after seeing the red flares. Apparently, they were retreat flares. Behind them, tales of thousands of creatures roared madly at the masked figures retreating after a failed attack. On the ground, blood and mud were the new ground of the battlefield, full of sorrows and sufferings, with the essence of death touching every masked man who ran. Leon's mask was half broken, revealing a red eye. He looked clearly powerless as he watched some masked figures stay behind to hold off the strange creatures and ensure the survival of the others. Bell snapped out of his reverie upon hearing a noise behind him, thus ceasing to think about that endless war that had taken so much from them and marked him so deeply. "I've been looking for you, Belle," Riveria said, slowly approaching Belle, sitting down next to him and resting her head on Belle's shoulder. "I was just thinking about Riveria," Belle replied, still gazing at the horizon. "Did you sleep well?" Belle asked, gently stroking her beautiful green hair. "Yes, although it was a short time since I had to organize the family members together with Finn and Gareth," Riveria said in a tired tone. "I see, good job," Belle said with a smile. They both silently gazed at the horizon where the sun had already risen completely, leaving a majestic scene. "We have to tell my father that we're a couple now. To be honest, I'm a little nervous thinking about how he'll react," Riveria said, a little tense. Even though she hadn't had much contact with her dad in recent years, he was still her dad and she had to tell him. "Are you worried he'll think you fell in love with a special elven hunter?" Belle asked, already knowing she was worried. Seeing her nod, he realized he was right. "Don't worry about it. He's part of Bolt, so I doubt he cares that I belong to the group," Belle replied casually. Seeing Riveria looking at him with a confused expression, Belle was also surprised, then a silly expression appeared on his face. "Riveria, don't you know what Bolt is?" Belle asked slowly, only to see her shake her head. So he decided to explain. "You see, Bolt is the organization that preceded the Hunters. Your father, His Majesty Larfel Sama, commanded the group during your grandfather's reign," Belle informed her, much to Riveria's surprise. "Wait, does that mean my proud father had a fauna?" Riveria asked incredulously. When Belle nodded, she became even more confused. "But my father hates the gods. When I escaped from Alf, he was disgusted to learn I had Loki's fauna," Riveria said, still not understanding. "Well, your father certainly despises the gods and other races in general, with the exception of elves. But His Majesty knows that sometimes there are those who have to do the dirty work and he understood that at the time and did it himself," Belle explained calmly. I watch Riveria muttering nonsense about her father. Apparently, that information broke her calm and serious demeanor. "You should know what Bolt is. Everyone in the royal family has access to the royal library where his findings are kept. It's not information that's hidden from the royal family," Belle explained patiently. "Yes, I had access, as you say, but I never paid attention to anything other than the outside world. The truth is, I was only interested in having an adventure outside the forest, Riveria said with a smile. Belle smiled upon learning that Riveria's dream since childhood had always been to leave the forest and see the things the world could offer. He, as a person who knew every part of the world and what it hid, preferred to stay in the forest. Tell me more about Bolt, Belle, now I'm curious. Riveria asked, settling more comfortably on Belle's shoulder to enjoy the story. As the princess commands, Belle said mockingly, making Riveria frown. That's right, you're no longer a princess, now you're my queen, Belle said, kissing her forehead. Riveria smiled happily and said nothing, so Belle began his story of Bolt. Bolt was a group that the former king of Alf and grandfather of Riveria ordered to be formed. The one who would be the leader was Larfel, father of Riveria and current king of Alf. The group had the same function as the special elven hunters, only they are no longer remembered because it has been centuries since the group disbanded. They were prodigious elves of their time, just like the hunters, but in a more discreet group. I didn't know anything about that. I once saw the name Bolt in a book, but I didn't think much of it. At the time, I thought it was some old military story and dismissed it immediately, Riveria said thoughtfully. Currently, only 4 members of that group remain. His Majesty Larfel Sama, the advisor to King Gom Sama, the leader of the royal guards Takashi Sama, and the supreme commander of Alf's forces, Jonathan Sama. Belle told him. The captain and some members were also part of Bolt, which is why the king appointed the captain as leader. Belle explained. Yes, I know these people. They are all close to Papa. I've seen them toasting together at the royal palace a few times. There used to be more of them in the group, but suddenly it dwindled. Riveria recalled. That makes the explanation easier. They are all stronger than me in power and experience, he told Riveria. Your father is currently the most powerful elf in the living world. He is level 9, Belle said, surprising Riveria. Every time Riveria heard something from Belle, her surprise increased. The mere fact that her father was so strong and possessed a fauna was already beyond her comprehension. Her father vehemently hated the gods, and she couldn't imagine him with a fauna. It was like saying a dwarf or a beastman would be refined in character, simply impossible, in her view. Belle spent the next few hours telling Riveria about Bolt and his exploits, which any member of the king's family could read about in the royal library. Belle. Riveria stood up and moved about a meter away from Belle and smiled. From now on I will show you the love I have for you. The pure love that only an elf can give, and I will show you. Riveria said, smiling. Belle couldn't help but smile at that declaration. He had already realized he had fallen in love with Riveria. Now he wanted to be with her always so they could enjoy their love together. Although he was a novice in matters of love, he would do everything in his power to make Riveria happy. Everything seemed to be going well for Belle, but deep down he still knew that there were things to come and things to face. He had to inform the king of what he had done. He didn't know what punishment the king would give him after he turned against his daughter, the princess of Alf and the Elves. After all, what Belle did was treason because he abandoned his mission and also turned against the daughter of the king of Alf. The Freya family was another matter entirely. She had to figure out how to deal with them, or rather, how to eliminate them from the face of the earth. She had already decided they were a threat to Akina and her family, and a few ideological words from Akina wouldn't change her mind. He was, and always would be, a soldier forged in war. The words of a girl who knew no cruelty of the world would have no effect on him. His dark and cruel view of reality would not change, no matter how miraculous Akina might seem. Justice and morality were words he removed from his dictionary and decided to forget for the sake of his mentality. At the moment I had no way to attack them, or at least not a way that wouldn't directly harm Akina. The only thing he could think of was to destroy her slowly, but that would take too long, and he didn't know what move Freya would make in retaliation against him. He also knew that Uranus wouldn't allow him to destroy the Freya Familia, as they would lose a significant military force from Aurario. This was yet another obstacle preventing him from taking direct action against Freya. This time he couldn't simply ask Uranus to let him destroy the Freya family. It was simply absurd to even think of asking him for that favor. Uranus could turn all of Aurario against him if he acted recklessly without any concrete and effective plan. It was foolish and stupid to go directly to attack them at their headquarters because he would be at a great disadvantage and he couldn't attack everyone at once, which could cause them to attack the Hestia Familia, and without their presence they would be destroyed. Belle frowned as he remembered how Akina had prevented him from killing the Freya family members, cursing a little that Akina had appeared at the most critical moment and prevented him from finishing them off. He sighed and decided to leave that for later, focusing on Riveria, who was affectionately holding his hands, slowly removing the gloves from his hands. Riveria felt the touch of Belle's hands and was very surprised. His hands were rougher than those of a dwarf who had spent years fighting like Gareth, much rougher than his. Riveria then realized how much Belle had truly struggled for his hands to be so rough and calloused. That an elf should have such rough hands was unbearable. It simply did not fit with the elegant and refined character for which they were known. I want you to know, Belle, that no matter what happens, I will always love you. Please always remember that, Riveria said, approaching him and giving him a sweet kiss. Belle returned the kiss and began kissing her back in a sweet moment for the new elf couple. The sun behind them only made the already majestic image even more so. Chapter 35. I'll show you the pure love that only an elf can show, Belle. We'll make our vows in front of the sacred tree, and Riveria began to explain her plans, but Belle stopped her. Riveria, Belle interrupted. You're getting ahead of yourself. I'm just beginning to understand what she's feeling, and you want to jump ahead with really important things, Belle said, calming Riveria down. She closed her eyes and sighed. She knew she was getting ahead of herself, but she couldn't help it. Deep in her heart was a feeling for Belle that was very strong and made her want to spend her time with him. After all, she was deeply in love with him. To accomplish all of that, I first need to clear my mind and overcome everything. I can't simply promise you that nothing will happen to me because even I can't foresee something like that, Belle said, sighing and gazing at the horizon. Nothing guarantees that tomorrow I won't break down and take my own life one single push and it would all be over for me, Belle said, looking at the horizon. Riveria listened to Belle's words and looked at him in silence, although her chest hurt from hearing Belle's words, she knew they were true. She slowly approached Belle and gently took his hands, feeling how rough they were but she didn't care, instead she stroked them a little. Belle, look at me please, Riveria asked gently. When Belle turned to look at her face, she continued, I want you to show me your true face, not the fake smile you've been wearing since you arrived. Riveria asked him seriously. Belle turned and looked at the horizon again in silence, slowly his expression changing to what would be the true one. Riveria began to mentally prepare herself to see an indifferent and emotionless face on Belle's face, but when she saw Belle's face she was a little surprised. Belle's face was not cold and indifferent, not at all. His face looked gaunt, tired, a little desolate, the face that only a person who had lived a long time could show. The face that was forged after a war, the cruelest and most brutal of wars. This is me, Riveria, an elf tired of so much fighting, of so much losing in life. I am a person who is already tired of life itself. Of my own life. Belle said with sorrow overflowing from every corner of his being. Riveria had to exert herself not to rush to hug Belle after hearing his words, but she remained resolute. Then, Belle, I'll give you a new reason to live. I'll do my best to change that bleak view you have of your life and make you feel what love is. Because now you're very important to me, Belle, and I won't let you leave my side for a reason like that. So, Belle, will you allow me to try to show you my love? Riveria asked, standing up and extending her hand to Belle. Belle opened his eyes a little, but still smiled slightly. He looked a little more at the horizon before getting up and standing in front of Riveria. It will be difficult, Riveria. I'm already 100 years old, and it will be hard to change my way of thinking after living with it for so long. Words won't change anything, but still do you plan to try? Belle asked, looking into Riveria's eyes. Yes, I am more than willing to try. Riveria answered firmly, without even hesitating at the moment of answering. Out of nowhere, an enormous murderous pressure mounted on Riveria. Belle had unleashed his full killer instinct on Riveria to further pressure her into her decision. I am considered one of the greatest genocidal maniacs in history, Riveria. Are you willing to continue knowing that? Will you keep trying? Belle asked, sharpening his gaze and giving off a deathly stench. Riveria heard this but did not hesitate or give in a little. She was saddened that Belle considered himself a genocidal maniac, but still did not back down from her word. There's still time to change, Belle. If you'll allow me, I'll try with all my might and show you, Riveria said, still holding her hand outstretched. Belle maintained the pressure before withdrawing it, smiled slightly, and squeezed Riveria's hand with a relaxed expression. Then Riveria, show me that path you mentioned so much, the one full of love, Belle said, smiling slightly. Riveria tightened her grip and smiled, knowing that Belle would give her a chance to prove her love. I stroked his hand a little and then hugged him gently. With that hug I was trying to convey my feelings to him. But it wouldn't be that easy, and he knew it. A hug would only be a small breeze for Belle's wounded heart. Let's go back to the chimney mansion. You still have a conversation to have with Akina, as far as I know. I also heard from Ace that she already has her answer. Riveria said, pulling away from the hug. Belle simply nodded. The truth is, he didn't remember that he had to give Ace an answer. I guess I said something important to her yesterday. I hope I didn't say something stupid. Belle thought, a little nervous about what he might have said to the blonde girl with an immature brain. Mansion with fireplace. Belle and Riveria walked for 10 minutes to reach the Chinia mansion, although they took a discreet path to avoid attracting attention. After all, Belle did not end up as the good guy in the story at the end of the fight. If he walked down the street in full public view, it was inevitable that he would receive dirty looks, although Bell himself couldn't care less. He was used to the world considering him trash. A simple ugly look from an ordinary citizen was like a fly staring at him. A little bit of elven pride remained in him even though he didn't want to see it. When they arrived at the Twilight Mansion they saw Aze at the door, apparently she was waiting for them for some reason. Riveria quickly realized that this was the answer Aze had mentioned earlier, so she just smiled and continued walking. Bell, for his part, saw a strange gleam in Aze's eyes, a gleam he would remember perfectly. It was the gleam of wanting to be stronger. Riveria, Bell hello. Aze greeted them as they arrived at the door. Hi. I know you want to talk to me, but you'll have to wait a little while I talk to Akina, Bell said, receiving a nod. The three entered the chimney mansion and were greeted by Harahim in a maid outfit with a friendly smile. When they entered, Hestia's scream was heard. You leveled up, Akina-chan. Hestia shouted, euphoric that Akina was one step closer to becoming a first-class student. Bell smiled at that, as did Riveria and Aze. Both of them stayed in the living room waiting for those two to finish updating their status. Level 4 Akina keeps leveling up, even the most prodigious elf in the group didn't level up that fast. Bell thought, remembering the times a little. Akina keeps growing, she'll undoubtedly surpass us in a matter of months, Riveria said, sitting next to Bell. Aze said nothing and only smiled a little upon learning that Akina was still getting stronger. Footsteps began to be heard in the hallway, soon Akina and Hestia were visible to the three in the living room. Hestia immediately became defensive upon seeing Aze and Riveria. You guys. You've come to continue the fight, huh? You won't touch my Akina-chan, you pigs. Hestia yelled, getting into a boxing stance and creating a comical scene. Without a doubt, Hestia would have been attacked by Bell if she were not the goddess of Akina and had not earned her respect. We didn't come for that, Hestia-sama, we just came to talk to Akina, Riveria said, trying to calm Hestia down a little. I see. I'll be keeping a close eye on you, Hestia said, moving her fingers threateningly. Since you're here, Bell, wouldn't you like me to update your status? Hestia asked. I suppose there's nothing wrong with it, okay, let's go then, Bell said, getting up from the armchair and walking alongside Hestia. Here we go, Hestia said, beginning to update Bell's status. Since you're here, I want to thank you for always supporting Akina-chan without hesitation, Hestia said, bowing her head slightly. Hestia had learned that Bell had to confront the executives of the Freya family, something they wouldn't have been able to do without her help. In addition to paying for all the damages incurred during the entire conflict, Bell did not pay a small sum, yet he paid it without hesitation. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You gave Akina a chance to be an adventurer, and you support her desire to become a hero, Bell said. Hestia smiled, knowing that was true, but her smile soon changed to a serious one. Akina unlocked a new ability when she leveled up. I can understand what it's about, but I can't help her much. From the description, you seem to be the only one who can help her. You said you knew her grandfather, so in theory, you should be able to. Hestia said seriously. Bell remained silent for a few seconds, unable to understand what Akina's grandfather had with one of his abilities. When you go out to the room, ask him. I'm sure you'll get an idea from the description, Hestia told him. Okay, I'll ask her when I get back to them, Bell confirmed. Well, almost there, huh? Hestia opened her eyes in surprise, but forced herself not to scream. Congratulations, you reached level 8, Hestia said, handing her Bell's status sheet. Bellcranel. Level 8. Strength 0i. Resistance 0i. Skill 0i. Agility 0i. Magic 0i. Development skills. Swordsman S. Wizard S. Healing power S. Magic resistance E. Strong body A. Spiritual healing B. Strong defense only when Elendite is activated. Great strength only when Elenlight is activated. Skills. Rebellion. Greatly increases the user's stamina and resistance against magical attacks. Elf Spirit. Increases the effects of magic and all skills in the face of adversity. Accelerated Singing. Can accelerate a singing without risk of Will-o'-the-Wisp. Back Destroyer. Increases the user's strength and also provides an extremely resistant body. Active Trigger. Shizukani. Greatly increases speed and dexterity. The effect increases the more you fight without rest. Never Retreat. Strengthens the user's body as long as they fight against a single opponent. Hrarskan. When fighting multiple enemies, your status increases greatly. Destroyed Cannon. Increases the effects of magic, tripling the power of attack magic. It also allows the user to maintain the magic circle of the spell they just cast as a ring on their arm, allowing them to use it whenever they want. However, they can only hold 2 spells at once, and using the ability requires mental effort. It has an active trigger, and the key to using it is to say the name of the spell. Immortal Elf. Increases resistance based on his will and unlimited spirit. Mutant stock. This ability emulates a magic staff, so no magic staff is needed. Blendite. Allows you to use the strong defense and great strength development skills. Active trigger. Magic. Nenshoishi. He can shoot fire like a laser from his mouth, exploding when it makes contact with something. The end of the earth is near, doom of the forest saints. Hot evil of the forest, imminent destruction of the elf. Thy elf. Super long chant magic unleashes a devastating electrical explosion that destroys everything in its path. But since it's total destruction, the user is also affected. It tore my soul from the storm of destruction, from the muddy sky, set my feet upon a rock, and steadied my steps. My world ravaged by holy war, a roaring horn at dawn. Annihilate all living beings, turn evil to ash. I will follow your will until I die in battle. This body feels nothing, yet it weeps neither. This enormous debt cannot be repaid. Sin of the elf, prominent spark, sharpen your will against me. A world without life, a world without a future, a world devastated by cruelty. Storm of twilight, guide my destiny in the war of tomorrow. Shirodu. Protection magic, creates a highly resistant magical shield. Holiness protector of the heavens, protect me. Elven lament. Healing magic. Testament of Saint Seldia, forgive me, for I have left all my elven pride behind. Healing harmony, cure all ills. Conqueror's hockey. Magic that allows the user to exert their own willpower over others. King's will, ruler's tenacity, absolute archbishop of his majesty. Great misery. Magic that increases the user's physical condition. My sins are my eternal damnation, my laments are silent howls in the forest. Consume me, sins of blood, feelings lost in battle. My life is dedicated to suffering. Spirit flame. Magic granted by the original fire spirit. Level 8. What's the point of being level 8 if it's already too late? Bell thought, a little sad, but he recovered quickly. By the way, the citizens and adventurers who saw your fight gave you a nickname, Hestia said, drawing Bell's attention. They nicknamed you Mythical Fire Lion. Apparently, they only saw the fire lion you made, Hestia said with a smile. What a curious name, I was expecting something like Evil Elf or something related, Bell said, putting on his uniform shirt and jacket. Oh right, you didn't get anything for leveling up, no skill, development skill, or anything, Hestia explained. You don't always get it when you level up, it's a probability, Hestia told him. You're right, you don't always get new things when you level up. Bell shrugged and shook his head. Now that I've reached level 8 I should be able to access my cultivation energy. Bell thought, cheering up a little. Bell said goodbye to Hestia and left the room, leaving Hestia a little thoughtful. Bell arrived in the room and saw the girls chatting animatedly, or at least Akina seemed quite animated. Bell, anything new in your state? Riveria asked after noticing Bell's arrival. Nothing interesting, I leveled up to 8. Bell replied, shrugging and not giving importance to that fact. Congratulations. As always, Akina was the first to react and congratulated Bell. Riveria and Aze also approached and congratulated Bell. Bell. Aze suddenly called to Bell. Can you train me? Aze asked, bowing slightly to Bell. Do you want me to correct your sword technique again? Bell asked, thinking about Aze's poor posture. To everyone else, her sword technique was excellent, but to Bell, it was careless and a waste of time. No, Aze suddenly shook her head. I want you to train me seriously so I can improve and protect my family like you told me to, Aze explained. Bell smiled falsely at that. The truth was that he didn't remember what he had said to Aze, so he was going to pretend that he did. So, training seriously, if that's what you want, but I won't hold back like I did in the past. Bell said, releasing a faint murderous intent so that Aze would realize he was serious about not holding back. Yes, don't hold back during training, Aze told him, accepting that Bell wouldn't hold back in his attacks. Alright, go and get some stamina and health potions, you'll need them a lot, Bell said, turning his gaze to Akina. Aze, meanwhile, ran off to get the potions. Akina, Hestia mentioned that you acquired a new magic. What's it about? Bell asked calmly. Oh, Hestia Sama deduced what it was, but she didn't know how to help me with it. She said that maybe you'll know what to do, Akina said, handing him the sheet with her condition. Bell silently took it and skimmed through it a bit. Everything was normal, level 4 and things that Akina already had in her state. Then he saw them. Legacy of the Hunters. You can use the magic of any member as long as you know their chant and name. Bell froze when he saw what Akina's new ability was. Without a doubt, it was an ability beyond compare to her growth ability. Akina Bell's voice trembled slightly, his hands no exception and moved a little. You just touched on a ridiculous point with this ability, Bell said with a smile. But I don't understand how to use it or what it does. I don't know which members it refers to or which hunter it's talking about, Akina said, confused. Akina still didn't know who the special elven hunters were, and Belle would probably never tell her, or at least he would wait until she was mentally mature enough to know the truth about her origins. You see, your grandfather and I are part of a group, and that's all you need to know about it. This ability allows you to use any magic from any member, as long as you know the incantation in their name, Belle explained. I see. Akina nodded, understanding the ability. As for the group, she knew Belle wouldn't tell her anything about it. So you know their magic? Akina asked. I know all of Akina's spells, or at least most of them. After all, we started with 375 members, and each one had at least 3 spells, Belle said, doing some calculations. Akina was surprised to realize that there were hundreds of magic spells she could use. It was literally an absurd ability, outside the rules of the world. You seem very excited about this, Belle. Is there something driving that? Riveria asked calmly, although she already knew what it was. I can't hide it, I'm really excited that Akina is using the captain's magic, Belle told them sincerely. But for now, I'll only give you one of your grandfather's abilities. His magic was very complex, and you're not at the level to use it all, but I'll make up for it with other magic, Belle said enthusiastically. Riveria smiled as she saw Belle truly cheer up. Apparently, seeing his captain's magic thrilled him immensely. The way Belle always talks about his captain made it obvious that he admires him a lot. Seeing his magic again, used by his granddaughter, thrilled him greatly. Come here, Akina, I'll show you some of your grandfather's magic and you'll start from there. Belle walked quickly to the exit and went out the door into the courtyard. Belle walked through the Hestia Familia Gardens and headed to the area where they could train Akina's magic. It was good that Apollo had dedicated an area for this, or they would have had to go to the dungeon. Okay, magic is. Belle began explaining magic to Akina, who listened attentively to everything Belle explained. Now do what I told you, Belle said, moving 6 meters away from Akina. Akina turned to face Belle and began the chant he had told her to sing. It was strange, but she wasn't going to complain about the magic. After all, she only had Firebolt. Belle had been disappointed when he saw that she was an elf without magic, and that's why he intensified his sword training, to compensate for the lack of magic. I serve good, I serve evil. My being craves security, but also chaos. I have a thought, an idea, an ideal. I look up and I am protected by you, bony wanderer. Infernus jail. The white mist began to surround Akina's body, floating harmoniously all over her. The white mist slowly began to turn black, and then it began to form a skull that covered Akina on all sides. Wow, the skull looks really cool. Akina was surprised to see that she was inside a transparent black skull. It looked majestic. Is it shield magic or does it do something else? Akina asked. When Akina turned to look at Belle, she saw him with his back to her, seemingly rubbing his eyes with his black gloved hand. Then no worries about me, Akina, Belle said, his voice trembling slightly. I got a little speck of dust in my eye and it's bothering me a bit, just wait a little while, Belle said, clearly lying. Riveria saw Belle staring, fascinated, at the dark transparent skull. She also saw a tear slide from Belle's eyes. When the tear came out of Belle's eye and then slid down his cheek, Belle turned around and began rubbing his eye as if something was bothering him. Ahem, Belle coughed slightly and turned to Akina with a smile. It's a shield, but it also has other functions. Sing forced and focus on me, Belle instructed her with a broad smile. Akina nodded and focused on what Belle asked of her. Forced. When Akina sang, black chains shot out from the skull's eyes and rushed towards Belle like a storm. The chains were completely black like coal and moved at a good speed. Belle did not move and allowed the chains to reach him. The chains reached Belle's body and tightly trapped him, leaving all his limbs suppressed by the chains of Akina's skull. Well done, Belle said, congratulating him. These chains restrict movement, but in return you can't move from the skull. You could say it's a good magic that works more as support than its own, Belle said, breaking the chains. Belle observed the chains for a moment before speaking. The power would be enough to restrain a level 5 person at the beginning, but if they specialize in strength like Otter or Gareth, you won't be able to restrain them unless they're level 4, Belle said, watching the chains disappear. Then it can complement the others, this could create a lot of opportunities in the dungeon, Akina said excitedly. Belle smiled as he saw the little elf excited about her new magic. It made him happy that she liked one of your grandfather's magic spells. Something's still missing, Belle said, drawing Akina's attention. You have to say Tros for your final function, Belle said, smiling. Akina nodded and did it. Tros. When Akina sang the short incantation, black chains emerged again from the skull's eyes, but these chains had something more to them. The chains had a kind of black smoke that came out of them like a plague, as if those chains unleashed pestilence on the world and led it to misery. When the chains shot out, the skull's eyes this time shone a bright red and seemed to see Belle's soul. Bell did nothing and let himself be caught by the chains, but the chains did not catch him like the previous time, instead they seemed to enter his soul through Bell's chest. Anyone who saw this would think the chains came out of Bell's chest, but they didn't cause him any harm. These chains are magical seals. They're inserted through the chest without causing harm and seal the magic in the center of the body. As long as you don't remove them, the magic will remain sealed by the chains, Bell explained, and to emphasize his point, he began to chant. Holy protector of the heavens, protect me. Shirodu. Bell recited his magic incantation, but nothing happened, the magic power didn't even circulate through his body or show any form. This sealing ability can seal magical power, but since I'm of a higher level than you, you can only seal my magic once before it collapses, Bell explained, pointing to the chains that cracked and then disintegrated in the air. I see, it has a functional variety and can be improved, Akina murmured, beginning to understand the magic Bell had taught her. That's right. The magic I taught you is a very versatile magic that your grandfather used. It was the weakest of his magics, Bell told her, much to Akina's surprise. If this is the weakest, what will the strongest be like? Akina said in surprise, but she stopped thinking about that to pay attention. If you only knew that your grandfather could summon a black hole. Bell thought, amused and a little nostalgic. Okay, now let's move on to the next magic. Bell said, but was stopped by Riveria. Wait, Bell. Riveria approached and stopped him. Akina is new to the world of chanting magic and lacks any experience with it. If you tell her too many spells, she'll be overwhelmed and won't be able to use them properly. It would be best if she learned to use magic slowly. When she grows up, she'll be able to use all the spells and will know when to use them. Riveria said with a smile. You're right. Bell sighed resignedly and became a little bitter. I got carried away by the excitement of seeing the captain's magic, Bell said, smiling again. It's okay, Bell, I know this can get exciting, Riveria said, approaching and taking his hand. You already promised Ace you train her today, let me help Riveria with the use of magic, Riveria suggested. Bell sighed, having forgotten that he had promised Ace he would train her. The poor girl had run off to get potions for her training, and he had forgotten about her. Alright, I'll train Ace while you train Akina with her magic, Bell said, accepting Riveria's suggestion. Focus her training on maintaining and improving the skull's defense, and also on better controlling the chains, as they can be broken if she doesn't use them effectively, Bell instructed. I'll do that. Now go to the entrance and train Ace, Riveria said, giving Bell a kiss on the cheek and pushing him slightly. Yes, I'm coming, said Bell, turning around and disappearing in a burst of speed. He stopped abruptly because it was faster than he remembered, stretched out a little, and then began to run slowly, gradually increasing his speed to get used to it. With that, he ran to the bars. Ace walked with her armor and sword at her hip and sheathed. In his hands he carried a box full of potions that Bell had asked him for his heavy training. The box contained at least 100 good quality potions, which I thought was enough. When he reached the gate of the chimney mansion, he saw Bell attacking repeatedly with his sword in the air. He seemed to be training, from which Ace deduced that he was getting used to his new level, level 8. Bell noticed Ace and stopped her constant attacks, then approached and looked at the potions critically. 100 potions won't be enough, you'll need many more than just 100 potions, Bell said, looking at the potions. But you can look for them later, Bell said, walking while signaling to Ace. Ace paled slightly upon hearing what Bell told her. After all, she believed there were too many potions, and Bell was telling her there weren't enough. I sighed, knowing how much I was spending on these potions, but I calmed down, remembering that I would receive training from a very experienced warrior. So, determined, she followed Bell across the yard. They walked until they reached a field inside the chimney mansion designated for intense training. Ace left the box with the 100 potions away from the place and stood 5 meters away from Bell, who was patiently looking at the sky. Seeing this, Ace waited a while. She didn't know what Bell was thinking, but she would wait for his training. Although she knew it would hurt him a lot, she didn't give up and pressed on. Determined to improve and become stronger. I can feel the energy a little, I feel it deep down, but I can't use it yet, but that's definitely it, I just have to figure out how to use it. Bell stopped pondering and focused on Ace in front of him. Alright Ace, the training is going to be tough and I won't show any mercy. One wrong step and you could die or lose a limb. Now that you know this, do you intend to continue the training? Because once it starts, I won't stop until it's absolutely necessary, Bell asked calmly. Yes. Ozzy didn't hesitate and answered firmly, she wanted to become strong, and with Bell training her she wanted to achieve it. I had seen the great fight that Akina and the Black Minotaur had against a strange black creature that exuded death and loneliness. This battle further fueled his determination to improve so that he could protect his family and kill the red-haired creature Revis. If that's what you want, so be it. Pay close attention, because I'm going to come without holding back. Belle unsheathed her sword and bent her legs lightly. "Here I come, Ace." Belle took off at terrifying speed towards Ace. The training had begun and it wouldn't stop. Chapter 36. "I think that's enough, Akina. You should take a short break," Riveria said. In front of her was Akina, panting with exhaustion and with her hands on her knees. They had been practicing the new magic that Belle had given them. "I can still continue," Akina said after a long breath. "Take 5 minutes, I insist," Riveria urged, seeing how he was still panting. "I'll go see how Belle and Ace are doing." Riveria turned around and started walking towards the central courtyard where Belle and Ace were training. As she walked, she couldn't help but remember her moments with Belle. Good times and bad times, mostly bad, but he didn't care. The important thing is that Belle is now ready to start over. I still feel it. Ever since Belle's resurrection, she had had a strange feeling, as if something wasn't right. She had decided not to pay much attention to it and continue with her life, but as the hours passed, that feeling kept growing. Swing clank clink paff. The sounds of Belle and Ace's battle reached his ears. The clashing metal echoed throughout the place. He was about to turn the corner to join them when he suddenly felt dizzy. Their feet wobbled a little, which surprised her. The dizziness was strange and sudden, but what surprised him most was that he staggered. Riveria had a lot of experience fighting, and the fact that she was staggering from dizziness worried her. He placed his hand on the wall and leaned against it. Her face said it all. She was confused. What was that? The feeling washed over her. It was confusion. Riveria was about to walk towards where Belle and Ace were training, but as soon as she took a step, everything began to fall apart. It seemed as if reality was collapsing, as if an illusion were beginning to disappear. Everything went black, but as soon as it went black, everything began to change again. Riveria was beyond confused. Her surroundings began to revert to the place where Belle had died and was subsequently resurrected. The place was still in ruins with rubble everywhere. "Huh? What's happening? It seems you're back." A female voice sounded from in front of her. Looking around, I noticed a woman. She had her arm outstretched and was touching his forehead with a finger. The woman was beautiful, with dull blue eyes. He exuded the aura of a god. The woman in front of him was a goddess. "Who are you?" Riveria asked, confused. "Who am I? Fufufu, I'm Hades." The woman introduced herself as Hades. Riveria didn't know what was happening. Everything had changed in a matter of seconds. I looked at the ground and froze. There was a body surrounded by a pool of blood. It was Belle. His body still had the same wounds as when he died. "Belle? Belle." Riveria began to move Belle's body. I noticed the wounds and her skin prickled. They were just as deep and ugly as when she had died. "Don't even try, little one. Belle-kun is already dead," Hades said with a smile. But he had come back to life. "He can't be dead. That's how it is. What you experienced was an illusion I created to see how you wanted your future to be," Hades told her with a playful tone. "Let me tell you, there were some interesting things, but energy cultivation. Really? That's old news." Riveria was left speechless. In fact, she just stared at Belle's body as she held him in her hands. I didn't know what to say. Belle was still dead and it had all been an illusion of Hades. "Why?" Riveria murmured softly. "Yeah? Why did you make me see that illusion?" Riveria demanded, without taking her eyes off Belle's body. Riveria was devastated. Belle was dead again. No, he was always dead. It had all been a lie on Hades' part. "Why else?" "I was bored and curious to see how you idealized a non-existent future," Hades replied with a big smile. Riveria's fists clenched in annoyance, but he said nothing. "I didn't understand how the gods could do whatever they wanted just for fun or a little entertainment." A single tear escaped from her eyes, sliding down her delicate cheek. Belle, Riveria whispered with sadness and helplessness. Suddenly Belle's body began to be enveloped in black fire. "I guess I have to go now. I'll take Belle-kun's body with me." That had taken Riveria by surprise. She saw Belle's body surrounded by black fire. I quickly tried to grab hold of him. I reached out my hand, but there was an invisible force preventing me. So he turned to Hades, who was looking at him with a smile. "You can't take it." "Of course I can. He signed the pact and now his soul belongs to me." "The pact?" "Of course, Belle-kun made a pact with me when he received his fauna from me. You have nothing to complain about, little one." Riveria was surprised by that, but reacted quickly because she had to prevent them from taking Belle's body. "Take my soul instead." Riveria's gaze was determined. She wasn't even thinking things through. Hades glanced at her sideways before snorting in amusement. "What good is your soul to me? I don't want it, give it to someone else." "Then I'll do whatever it takes, but don't take Belle with you." "Oh, that is interesting." Hades gave a strange smile upon hearing Riveria's statement. "That's a very strong statement, are you sure?" After Hades's words, Riveria realized what she had been saying without thinking. But I looked at Bel's body and his determination returned. She loved Bel with all her heart and would fight for him even if he were dead. I'm sure. Riveria reaffirmed. Alright, let's make a deal then. Hades seemed amused by Riveria's determination. You'll run some errands I need, and in return I'll revive Bel-kun. Riveria realized something he should have realized a long time ago. And that meant Hades was using his powers. Divine powers that he shouldn't be able to use on the mortal plane. There are exceptions, little one, and I would advise you not to ask too many questions. As if he could read her thoughts, Hades replied. Understanding that she shouldn't comment unnecessarily, Riveria decided not to ask anything about it. Okay. What do you want me to do? Riveria asked. It's easy. In the past, there were powerful artifacts that no longer exist. I want you to go back in time and bring them to me, Hades declared, leaving Riveria perplexed. The past. That was something that didn't make sense. Let me explain, I'll send you to a reality that hasn't yet reached this era. That way we won't change anything in this reality, Hades explained. Huh? That left Riveria confused. Hades looked at Riveria's confused face and sighed wearily. Look, little one, don't ask any questions. The subject of realities goes beyond mortal understanding. The best thing for your mind would be not to think about it, Hades told her. I see. I won't ask any more about it. Explain to me what I have to do to revive Bel. Riveria asked, setting aside the topic of realities. She understood that she shouldn't interfere in Hades's affairs. She wanted Bel by her side again and would do everything possible to make it happen. You see, I'm going to send you to a reality that's still in the past. Once there, you'll appear in the scene where the object was lost. Once you have it, a few days will pass before you shift to another timeline. Sending you from one reality to another is difficult and takes time, so you'll have to survive on your own, Hades explained. Okay, what do you need me to find? Riveria asked. The first would be the Totem of Truth, the second Lament of a King, and finally, the Ancestral Plate. Bring me those, and I will revive Bel-kun without any consequences, Hades told him. Everything Hades asked of her sounded strange, but Riveria knew she shouldn't question anything about the goddess. If he wanted to have Bel back by his side, he would have to do whatever Hades asked him to do, to the letter. So, with a confident look, he wiped a tear from his cheek and prepared himself with his cane for any danger. One thing, if you die there you should know what will happen to you. Hades said out of nowhere, seeing Riveria nod he continued good, I'll start everything, stay still and don't do anything. Riveria nodded in confirmation. He began to mentally prepare himself for anything, confident that he could handle anything being a level 6. Hades extended his hands to his sides, as if he were about to give a hug. Her eyes began to emit a green fire that emitted a great deal of power, more than any magic Riveria had ever seen. Hades's hands began to emit a greenish aura, which slowly began to move towards Riveria to completely envelop her. Hades was murmuring things in a very low tone and in a language that Riveria could not identify. Everything around him began to turn completely dark. Now she realized that even at 100 years old, she could still be carried away by her emotions and make hasty decisions. I agree to go to the past of another reality just for Bel. I don't regret it, but I do wish I had thought things through better. I would do anything for Bel, even if it meant going back in time to find things I've never heard of. Before she could see anything, she began to feel her feet getting wet. It was as if I were in a deep puddle of water. The sensation reached below the knee. Gradually his vision cleared and he could see some rocky walls, similar to those of the dungeon. Where am I? Riveria wondered. I looked down and noticed that I was indeed in what appeared to be a puddle of water. But the water was black, it looked dirty and contaminated by various things. Her boots and the bottom of her dress were already stained by the water, but she didn't pay much attention to it. His goal was to find out where she was and then search for the objects that the goddess Hades asked him for. I don't even know what objects look like. Now he realized that he never asked about the appearance of what he was looking for. That's why he was smiling the whole time. She gradually began to get more annoyed with Hades. That goddess had mocked her throughout the entire conversation. With his gaze, expressions, and even words, he looked at Bel's death as if it were nothing. I have to get out of here. He began to move his feet through the water. He had to get out of the cave where he was and start looking for clues about the objects. I walked through the water for several minutes, walking in the silent cave that didn't have much to see. It was like a dungeon but without monsters, just stone walls. After walking for 10 minutes I managed to reach the exit, where I noticed that it was night. The moon in the sky illuminated the area a little. The stars gave the place a magical touch. Or at least that's how it should be. The whole place was a disaster, black water stretched for miles, crooked trees were also in the place, it was like a swamp. But there wasn't just plain black water. There was an excessive number of corpses, all floating in the black water with fatal wounds or missing limbs. What happened here? Riveria didn't panic, she was surprised but didn't panic. He was 100 years old and also had too much experience in the dungeon where he saw countless such cases. He thought with a cool head and observed the place more closely. To their surprise, a large number of the bodies were those of elves, all of them already dead and with varied expressions. Sadness, anger, relief, helplessness. Apparently they were in the middle of a war. The other bodies were all human beasts, werecats, wolves, tigers, raccoons, rats, bows, and many more. He got a better look at the elves and noticed the symbol of Alf's royal guard. That really caught her off guard. When did this happen? I had never heard of a war only against beastmen. I looked at the elf and found his face familiar. I've seen her face before. He thought for a while, delving into his most distant memories until he finally remembered. The dead elf was a guard who looked after her when she was only 9 years old. He was the husband of a maid who played with her. She remembered how the elf helped her hide from her teacher at the time, but one day the elf simply didn't return. He had seen the maid depressed for some reason, shortly before she quit her job and left. She never knew what happened, but now she understood. I don't even remember your name. Riveria sighed heavily and closed the elf's eyes. Rest in peace, and thank you for helping me when I was little. The elf wore light golden armor. It was the armor of the royal guard of Alf's palace. Having dismissed the elf, he began to walk through the sea of corpses floating in the black water. He moved them with his staff, observing the different corpses that were in the place. I noticed that there were also elves from Alf's elven army, with their emerald green armor. Riveria began to feel uncomfortable with her surroundings. She was in a place she didn't know and surrounded by corpses. Ugh. The growl alerted her. She looked to where it came from and saw a catman writhing in agony from his wounds. Her body floated face up in the black water, seemingly unaware of Riveria's presence. Stupid elves starting a senseless war, all for a stupid totem. The catman sighed as his eyes went completely dark. He had spoken his last words before dying, words that only cursed the elves. The catman's words caught Riveria's attention. The little he had said had given her a lot of information. So it was the elves who started this battle. Riveria felt disappointed at that. It seems all because of a totem, perhaps the totem of truth. He approached the catman and closed his eyes. Although their races were apparently enemies, he would still bid farewell to a dead man with respect. The catman wore a black metal mask that covered the upper part of his face. In fact, all the beastmen wore the same masks. They look like they're part of an army. Riveria deduced upon seeing a silver moon on the forehead of the black metal mask. Riveria suddenly moved her head to the side. She had felt an increase in magical power not far from her position. Boom. A powerful explosion occurred, and it was no ordinary explosion. That power, it must be at least the level 6 magic of an elf, but what would an adventurer do in this place? Riveria hesitated but started running towards the area. He had to see what was happening there. Everything was confusing. The Sea of the Dead, the elves of the Royal Guard, and Alf's elven army. The catman with the silver moon on his mask, the apparent war started by the elves. I have to get there before more people die. Riveria thought, wanting to end the bloodbath. Her level 6 speed allowed her to run at great speed, even though she wasn't specialized in speed. Even so, she was fast because she was level 6. I skillfully dodged the corpses that covered the black water, apologizing to the elves for not being able to say goodbye to them. Swing clank clink clank. The metallic sound reached their ears. The fight was near. His body accelerated as much as it could to make it there on time. Finally I arrived at the place where two people were fighting fiercely. The first was an elf in a black robe that was already dirty and torn, with many bloodstains overflowing from the cuts. He wore a horse mask on his face, although half of the mask had already disappeared. His gloved hands wielded a sword identical to Belle's. The elf was a special elven hunter. On the other side, a beastman was fighting. He was a tiger man. He wore the same mask as the catman Riveria had fired. He sported silver armor made of reinforced leather covering his entire body. He wasn't brandishing a weapon. His fingernails were very long and blue, measuring around 10 centimeters in length. The claws, well, they were blue, overflowing with a magical essence. Apparently, it was magic too. Both warriors fought frenetically, each launching deadly attacks with murderous intent overflowing from their bodies. Both were covered in wounds and overflowing with an insane amount of blood. The elf attacking with his sword and the tiger man with his magical blue claws. Riveria did not want the fight to continue, so he decided to stop it. Stop, Riveria ordered. Her scream attracted the attention of the two fighters, but neither of them said anything. The tiger man seemed to get even angrier when he saw that Riveria was an elf. In fact, he seemed to be killing her with his hateful eyes. On the other hand, the elf looked shocked, his one eye seeing Riveria's figure with panic and fear. "Another damn elf," said the tiger man, annoyed. He looked seriously injured, but he stood there unconcerned about the deep wounds all over his body. "Princess Riveria, get out of here," the elf shouted, overcome with panic. The tiger man was surprised for a split second, recovered quickly, and leaped swiftly at Riveria. He had an opportunity to strike a critical blow to elven morale. Riveria prepared to face the tiger man, but before he arrived he was attacked by multiple orbs of air. The tiger man growled as he felt pain throughout his body, yet he remained standing and ready to fight. The elf appeared before Riveria with his hands holding his sword, ready to give his life for Riveria. "I shouldn't be here, Princess Riveria," said the elf in front of Riveria. "I'll buy you some time. You take advantage of it to get away as quickly as you can." "You talk too much," roared the tiger man, annoyed. This courtyard, the ground beneath his feet covered in water, he lunged at Riveria, but the elf lunged at him, blocking his path. Clink clank swim. They exchanged deadly attacks again, both of which were intended to kill the opponent. Water splashed everywhere, accompanied by sparks from the clash of the two warriors. "Stop." Riveria became annoyed when he saw that they didn't stop. She moved at her level 6 speed and tried to stop them herself. But to his disbelief, the tiger man directed an attack at his chest. The speed and power with which they were moving was too much. She was a mage, so she wasn't specialized in intense hand-to-hand combat. Riveria wouldn't be able to move her cane in time to block the attack, but before the blow landed, she felt a hand push her. Ugh. She felt helpless as she watched the elf push her away from the blow, but as a consequence, it was the elf who had received the blow. Surprisingly, the elf moved his sword and plunged it into the tiger man's chest, pushing hard to cause as much damage as possible. Grrrrrr. The two warriors glared at each other in annoyance before separating. The two looked at each other as the deep wound spread. It seemed that the mortal wounds did not bother them. The elf wasted no time and sang a short chant, firing multiple red scythes at the tiger man. The tiger man did not hesitate and began to cut them with his magic claws, advancing as he did so. When Riveria saw that they would not stop, she took her staff, prepared herself, and began to recite the incantation of her magic. This tense man-tiger tried to attack her, but the elf stood in his way. If he neglected the elf for too long, he would kill him without hesitation. The tiger man's claws glowed brightly before he fired at the elf, who responded in kind and fired more red scythes. Crash paff. The elf's scythes were cut by the tiger man's claws, and he began to attack with even more ferocity. He had a new objective of great value to the war. Each cut going for the kill quickly, he wanted to finish off the horse mask elf and then go after Riveria to prevent her from using her magic. The elf seemed to be overwhelmed by the tiger man's explosive power and deadly claws. But he did not retreat. He used his last strength and returned the attacks. Slash. The flash of blue was all the elf saw before the tiger man cut off one of his arms. He didn't stay still and plunged his scythe into the tiger man's leg. The tiger growled but didn't back down either. The elf made a short chant and shot multiple airballs that hit the tiger man's body. They separated due to the critical damage they received. No sooner had he touched the ground than the tiger man couldn't help but look to the side, where Riveria's magic was complete. Herald of the End, white snow. It forms whirlwinds before twilight. Fading light, frozen earth. Blizzard, 3 harsh winters. My name is Elf. Wind from Bolvator. The powerful blizzard struck the tiger man who could do nothing but watch helplessly as he was frozen. Everything behind him for several meters was also frozen by Riveria's magic. Riveria sighed as she saw the fight was over, but frowned as she watched multiple scythes crash against the ice where the werewolf stood. The scythes cut the tiger man to death, thus ending the deadly fight between them. There was no need to kill him, he had already been incapacitated, Riveria said angrily. The elf with the horse mask looked at her silently, not answering her question at all. We'll talk about that later, for now let's heal your wounds, Riveria said, approaching the elf, extending her hand and preparing to perform her chant. But before it could begin, the elf's body collapsed to the ground. Damn it. Riveria crouched down and began to perform his chant to heal the elf with the most horse-like face. While reciting his magic, I looked around for the arm the elf had lost. He finished his incantation and began to heal the elf with his Van Alhain magic. The magic slowly began to heal the elf's wounds. It wouldn't cure him completely, but it would cure him enough so that his life would no longer be in danger, but he should still be checked by a healer. There it is. Attack. A shout was heard from afar, catching Riveria's attention. He turned his head and frowned, watching as 3 beastmen approached wearing the same mask and the same reinforced silver leather armor. He stopped his magic and carried the elf on his shoulder. He wouldn't have time to look for the lost arm. She understood that she could not reason with the beast men. Besides, they seemed to want to kill her just by looking at her. She deduced that it was because of her hair and ears. Her ears were longer than normal, and her hair was jade-colored, which betrayed her as being of royal lineage. But the elf on her shoulders, she began to run as fast as she could to escape the beastmen who were following her. Damn, they're fast. She thought, a little worried. If they were as strong as the Tiger Man, he would be in serious trouble. He couldn't hide because of his race's enhanced sense of smell, so running was the only option. However, that wouldn't help him much. The beastmen were faster than her. It was noticeable how easily they closed the distance. As I am. Riveria was surprised to have barely noticed a blur beside her. She was about to turn her head when more passed by. As I am. He finally turned his head and saw 3 special elven hunters running in the direction of the 3 beastmen. Princess Riveria, we have to get you out of here, please follow me. A masked elf stopped in front of them. We have to help the other 3, we can't. Riveria tried to plead to prevent more deaths of her race for what she believed was unnecessary. They'll take care of them, the priority is getting you out of here, please follow me, the elf insisted, his monotonous voice now broken. The concern about Riveria being in that place was noticeable. Seeing this, Riveria sighed and resigned herself. She knew very well the loyalty and devotion that the elves have for the royal family. Okay, please help me with him, he's badly hurt, Riveria said, handing over the horse-masked elf. Please follow me, I will take you to a safe place, said the elf after carrying the injured elf. They both began to move quickly away from the place, with the sounds and explosions of the fight in the background. Riveria frowned, unable to help any further. She felt powerless. But that thought, they moved away from the fighting zone. They soon arrived at what was the war headquarters. There were hundreds of tents everywhere. The place was not flooded with black water. Instead, it was dirty mud that filled the space. When the elves saw Riveria arrive, their eyes widened in surprise, and they quickly stood up straight in her presence. However, Riveria could see the mental and physical exhaustion that the elves displayed in their eyes. There were thousands of elves in the camp, some were from Alf's royal guard, others from Alf's elven army, and in smaller numbers, there were special elven hunters with their white masks and black robes. There were many elves who could not even stand up. They had to be supported by others to get up. Their bodies were covered in bandages, and they were dirty from their armor and weapons. It was clear that the war they were fighting was very hard. Seeing people of her race in these conditions depressed her a little. Her noble race in such ugly conditions was sad. What is the princess doing here? The princess shouldn't be here, it's too dangerous. She should return to the palace where she will be safe. Several comments began to emerge from the mouths of the elves. The elf who brought her to the place had detoured to deliver the horse-masked elf to the healers. Make way for the commander in operation. A shout sounded from behind the crowd. The elves began to clear a path for a person, little by little, until the person came into Riveria's sight. He was a special elven hunter with a dragon mask. The elf with the dragon mask was not wearing the hood of his robe, and his long red hair looked dirty. Princess Riveria. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.